The meeting starts again in approximately 1 minute. So you're projecting the document? Yeah, I see it over here too, so that's good. But I can't see myself, so I have no idea where I am on the screen. So given that we have so much time on our hands, we just have to announce that the meeting has started. So I'll just start talking about the RTC web transport, and those who are late will just have to sneak into their seats quietly.
Hello, folks over there, come back. Time to stop your secondary conversations and return.
And I'm going to try to stand still because there's a camera trained on me somewhere instead of wandering around the stage as I usually do. Anyway, this is about the transports document on RTC Web. The transports document is one of those pieces that is really a nexus where it puts strings together. We realized that the goal of overview was to have pointers to everything. And so that you start with overview and then you point to everything that's needed, and that points to everything that's needed again at the level below. Turned out that a large chunk of pointers to what's needed were in transport. And so the transport document was born. Originally as an appendix and overview, and then spun off as a separate document, which turned out to be very useful. It got more comments on the first version of as a separate document than it had ever had as an appendix. Next slide. Yeah, that's mostly what's about. This is an RTC web document. So it does not specify any API stuff. That's WebRTC stuff. It does not specify the parts of negotiation that go out of band, not even SDP. Sometimes it points at SDP's features with weasel words that say, hey, if it's SDP, it looks like this, but if it doesn't, then it doesn't. At least that's what it should do. And if there is stuff that's going on at the network layer, at the transport layer that isn't pointed to by the transports document, that's a bug, and you should file a bug on it. Next. Yep. There are a couple of items that actually are what I would characterize as protocol specification, which belong here, which don't really fit there, but they have nowhere else to go. So in the spirit of, okay, we do what we have to do, we specify them here. One is the words that say data channels and RTP can be multiplexed, because we got the data channel spec and we got an RTP spec, but the RTP spec only talks about RTP and the data channel only talks about data channel. So there has to be a spec that says, hey, we can multiplex this. There's a piece about sender prioritization and the congestion. That is not how many packets can you send, but which packets do you send? And there's some words about the choices you can make based on ICE, the raft of different specifications that currently constitute ICE. Next. After the London IETF, we have a number of things that are resolved. ICE-TCP candidates, where several people had forgotten what we decided, but the minutes clearly said that there was a decision. So the document now reflects the decision. And DSCP markings described better, IPv6 temporary addresses and so on. These are uncontroversial. I won't say more about them. I hope they're uncontroversial. Next. Still missing stuff. We have no specification of how you connect to things through a firewall. The way most popular suggestion with implementers has been the HTTP connect method, which just happens to have a few items that are not specified. And it's definitely not clear that we have a consensus on how the choice of which packet to send next actually works out. Next.
I do not think HTTP Connect is missing from this document. It's out of scope for this working group.
Let's return to that in a few slides, okay?
Okay.
Okay, priority. When to send what? It's not a matter of can you send a packet or can you not? That's congestion control. It's about if I have a congested channel, I can only send this many kilobytes in the next cycle. Which packets do I choose to send? It kind of seems obvious that if I have a high priority audio channel and a low priority audio channel, then more packets from the high priority channels should go out than from the low priority audio channel. But how many? And if I have multiple of them, how do I resolve this? The first question is, do we need to specify it? And the second question is, if the answer is yes, what do we specify? The guidelines I put up when trying to put something together was, if I raise the priority of something, it should get better service. And another guideline was that, hey, bad things happen when you don't send anything on the channel because things time out. It's better to share the resources a little bit. And the feeling is that we're not talking about upping the traffic on one channel by 2%. We're talking about order of magnitude increases, or as I've been told once, close order of magnitude, because we're dealing with powers of two. We're not talking about tuning exact percentages. And of course, this is something that's a rough guide. Let's keep it simple. Next. So what I put in as a something a little more serious than a complete strawman and a little less serious than this is going to be the spec that saves the world was that if we have a single congestion control environment, this happens when we have one 5-tuple and a single DSCP on it. This can also happen if we happen to know that that two flows are experiencing the same congestion environment despite not being in this group, but we don't know how to do that yet. Then we should do a weighted round robin between the various pieces of connection. So that roughly, if you specify that something is more important, one step more important than something else, then it should get twice the amount of resource as something else. This isn't specifying codec behavior. I mean, there's a lot of things a codec could do that would be smarter than just sending the first packet in the queue. you could configure the codec to say this, the bandwidth I think you should optimize for is the bandwidth I'm currently allowed to send a congestion controller, or rather you're part of it. Or you could drop non-dependency packets, push back on data channels. I mean, I kind of let the whole thing slide as implementations will do what implementations do. I don't know if that's okay, but that's what the text currently says. Next slide. So the pro is that it's simple to specify. Cons are its limited applicability because it doesn't say anything about what you do when things occur in different congestion control environments, and nobody else does anything exactly like this, so we really don't know if it works. The alternatives I saw was leave it to implement the discretion. That is, everyone does his own thing. We could use a strict priority scheme saying always send from the highest priority channel that has stuff to send. Or we can specify something more complete, more complex, or both. Or we could do something else. I think that was the last slide on this topic. Can you just flick to the next slide to check that? Yep. Okay, back. Comments?
So Colin, with very much my individual hat on here, I don't care deeply what we say here because I think this only matters if the congestion is happening in fact, on the link that your computer is directly connected to, which is seldom the case. So actually what the routers do is going to be more important than this. But I suspect that if we go forward with this, one downside I see of it is this is effectively tail drop. And I think when this gets into, when the router people notice this, they will tell us that tail drop is the worst possible solution to choose, and we should do random early detection, weighted random early detection.
One slide back, please. This is not tail drop. This is drop.
No, I mean, round robin's tail drop, right, with weighted queues, isn't it? I mean,
well,
I don't claim to know anything about this. What I claimed is we should avoid something that'll slow us down later.
Yeah. So the choice of which packet to send is, and therefore which packet to drop, is not specified in this sketch. It says which flow gets to send a packet. That's the difference between this and that's why I say it's drop. It's not tail drop.
I see. I misunderstood the proposal. Okay, but my goal here is if we do put something in this case, let's make sure it is. I mean, I don't think it's going to help much because the congestion doesn't happen where this is in controlling, and let's make sure that we pick something that other people don't complain about in how we describe it.
I think you're wrong about the congestion.
Sorry, Ted Hardy speaking, and I was about to disagree with him myself, because actually I think in wireless environments, it's quite likely that there are going to be cases where it is in fact the first hop that is potentially congested. And so you may see situations here where a single congestion control environment over a wireless link, not a cellular wireless link, but a 802.11 wireless link is going to be in need of something like this. I don't have a strong opinion about whether weighted round robin is the right thing to do, but I do think some way of designating which flow gets to send is what it requires to make priority make any sense at all.
Actually, I have another comment.
Name, please.
Roman. If we don't specify this, it will make it very hard for the routers to specify this correctly because this behavior will actually interwork with the router behavior on the congestion control. So if this is underspecified or specified in a way that it's unpredictable, we can actually create much bigger problem optimizing routers. And the other thing that you're saying that you're not specifying which packets to drop, but it effectively will do this because if you are not sending packets from one of the flows, you're essentially introducing a delay on when the packet is sent. So the jitter buffer downstream will drop this. And again, this is probably going to be the worst thing that can happen to the stream as far as recovery is concerned. It's much better to essentially somehow inform early to the stream that it will not be able to send, so it can adjust to do something productive with that versus just essentially get the packet to be sent late.
Magnus Westlund. I got a bit wondering about why you talk about routers. This is about how the endpoint emits. I'm really saying decide on which packets to emit. And from my perspective, you don't even need to do the drop. The question here really is about assigning, I mean, in some sense, depending on, you have in SCTP, the data there, you can say, okay, you consume data according to these tables. And as long as you have, you don't even need to drop it. If it's a file transfer or something like that, it's just a matter of how quickly does it go across. So you're not dropping, it's just controlling how you consume or how you can move the data between the endpoints. For RTP, I don't see you can work on packet level. You need to actually take consideration for encoding to the rate in proportion to the priorities. So, and I don't see how it affects the router directly.
It doesn't affect the router directly. What I guess what I meant to say is for each stream, we're concerned for the end-to-end latency from the origination through the router to the termination point. And essentially, if we underspecify it here, most of the router, like when you're trying to optimize the algorithms on the routers to minimize the latency from the end-to-end, from the encoding, again, through this algorithm to the router, it might affect the way this algorithm works. We might not need, essentially, if we're trying to optimize the router to minimize the delay for everything, it might not actually do the right thing for some of the.
So I don't understand how the router can do anything about, because this is all hidden within 1/6 tuple. So yeah. From that perspective, being a 6 tuple, the router just see it as it's one particular flow. I handle it according to my forwarding rules for that 6 tuple and don't do more. It's not its question to doing anything about.
So back to the comment to Cullen, is that the cases where things get grouped together are when we're doing multiplexing and not using DSCP marking, for instance, for TCP, for flows over TCP. And the other is if Varun's algorithm for detecting flows with a common congestion point actually is useful in practice. And of course, the third case is when it's the local interface that is the congestion point, which is one that Ted mentioned.
Say your second point slightly again. I'm not sure.
So in RMCAT, Varun has, I think it's Varun, has come up with a draft that specifies an algorithm by which you can detect that two flows have a common congestion point. And he's suggesting that that if so, they should be put under the management of the same congestion controller.
That's good. Martin Thompson, I was just going to point out here that rather than try to stipulate anything, because this is actually quite complicated, and a lot of the decisions we're making depend a great deal on how much elasticity an individual stream has. There is a certain minimum amount of bits that you can dedicate to an audio channel before it becomes completely unusable. And you want to make sure that many bits get on the network. Otherwise, there's no point in continuing. But then, of course, beyond that point, you can.
Yep.
I'm going to ignore that. But beyond that, you can scale up to a certain point as well, and that portion of that stream is elastic. And saying anything here, I think, is going to invite too much. I think that the only reason we want to do something like stipulate proportions given to different priorities is so that we have a rule of thumb, and anything more than that is likely to cause us trouble downstream. And
So-
the sorts of trouble that Cullen was talking about included.
So you're suggesting that we should phrase this more like implement or phrase the specifics as implement the guidelines more than, yeah, that makes sense.
So relaying Randall Jessup from the Jabber Room, he observes, as I think Ted began to point out, that the first hop in residential networks is frequently congested. And if you're talking from residential to residential, the first and last hops. He also points out, unlike a router, we do have control of the sender codecs, even if a bit delayed. Congestion control should handle the congestion. This is about when a packet A gets sent to relative to a packet B. Congestion control handles the rest.
Ted Hardy again. And I think that there's another piece of this that we've discussed in the working group on a couple of occasions, which is if you have both data channel and media, there are different use cases where one may take priority over the other, and the media may have elasticity in it, but the data channel may not. And so in certain games, you may, for example, have the data channel have strict priority over the media channels because the media channels are auxiliary. In other things, it may be exactly the reverse. So I think we don't care in this how the application determines priority, but we do care that we don't presume that there's elasticity in the underlying congestion control context, because there may not be for all things that are in that shared congestion control context. If congestion is on the local link and you have both data channel and media channels, some of them may be elastic and some of them not. So we can't build something that presumes that elasticity and succeed for all the use cases we have.
Yeah, Magnus Westlund. I mean, this is hard, and the problem from the other side of ignoring it or saying specifying too little is that we're not going to get consistent behavior between implementations, and that's also my real worry here, is that having inconsistent behavior is going to be as damaging to the application than implementers as having over specified or maybe so, but.
I mean, I'm Cullen James. I'm fine with the idea of implementer guidelines and trying to have things, but you're going to have that inconsistent behavior, because if your mental model of this is you have an infinitely fast link to your first hop router, which then is doing whatever sort of prioritization it does. I mean, that's a scenario we have all the time in our deployments of these things. You're on an 802 Wi-Fi link that 5 megabits per second connected to a Linksys router located to a 256K uplink on DSL. And that Linksys router's algorithms are not predictable, right? And so we've got to be able to deal with that not predictable case as well. I'm not saying that doesn't mean we shouldn't do this. I'm fine with doing this, but we can't assume that we're going to get predictable behavior.
But that only applies if you have multiple flows. If you're actually transmitting it within the same 6 tuple.
No.
But
the
packet
Linksys
order
code, for example, prioritizes things differently on the size of the packets, not just the 6 tuples.
So you mean a reordering?
Yes. Because then you get your TCP acts faster that way, and the internet's faster. That was the logic for doing that reordering.
For some way to see what kind of packet it was. There's a bits that told you what it was saying. Only.
Okay, so trying to draw conclusions and move on. It seems that most people are reasonably happy with seeing this, something approximately this, as implement the guidelines, saying we should aim for an effect about that looks approximately like this, and we should back off from constraining the implementer too much. So with that, I suggest we go on.
Any objections to that phrasing that Harold put? This is Cullen with my chair hat on. Okay, so I think the conclusion for the minutes, let me paraphrase this again, is that the room is happy with some implementation guidelines along the lines of what Harold's been proposing here.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. Next slide. Multiplexing modes. This is section 4.1 of the spec. I put in a requirement that an implementation should or must be able to say, I don't want multiplexing. Keep everything separate. That's 1 5 tuple per media stream, 1 5 tuple for data. And I also claim that it must be able to support the configuration of all media, all data, and 1 5 tuple, bundle, everything. Those are the extreme endpoints. RTCP max. I did not touch RTCP max here because RTCP max is something that we already said this should be supported. I don't know why anyone would want to do anything but RTCP max if they have the choice. Yeah, so I also mentioned that the case with media streams grouped by type, that is all the video goes together and all the audio goes together, and that we could put data inside one of the bundles or not outside of the bundles. But I put that as may support these configurations and didn't say anything specific. So the question is, do we want more things on the must list, which then will trickle up to WebRTC as you have to have an API to specify this. The one suggestion I had from the list, well, that's how I parsed Carl's suggestion, Carl's message, was that we needed at least one must configuration where data is not multiplexed with the media at all. It's on its own separate channel. And this might occur in be combined with any grouping of media, but he was very loud about the separate data channel. Comments on that one?
Yes, Christer Holmberg. I think the second bullet, I mean, the media streams per type, you mean media type? I think that should be a must. It should be possible to, or must be possible to say you want to use audio and video, for example, on different bundles. And I guess what you were just talking about was this white sub-bullet. I think that should be a fork bullet, that data either bundled or unbundled. I mean, together with the media, I think that should also be a must.
Okay, so you want must media streams grouped by type with data?
Well,
must.
I think they're two separate issues. I mean, first, if we only talk about media type, and when I say media type, I mean audio, video. I mean that kind of media type. That should be a must. Then we should have a separate bullet, whether you want to take the data channel and bundle that together with a media type, or if you want to have it completely separate. And I think that should also be a must. Well, but then we can discuss whether you should, I mean, if you let's say, for example, you have different bundle groups for audio and video, and then you want to have data with one of those, whether you should be able to specify that, you know, I want data with audio, I want data with video, or I want data, you know, on its own. I mean, I don't think that should be too difficult to you know, having the API or whatever you specified.
Why would I want this?
What do you want? What?
Why would I wish to adopt that kind of API complexity for as far as with no value proposition?
Well, I don't think it's complex, but I think there may be different characteristics regarding QoS and whatever to these different media types and so on. So I think it's
maybe like odd packets are handled differently or short packets.
So don't forget that you can't really control whether you.
Justin?
Oh, Justin Uberti. So you can't control exactly what bundle happens. You only control what you actually propose. And so, you can propose that I'm going to bundle everything like, on their own thing, but the other side may choose, well, like I'm not going to do any bundling whatsoever. So, the current mechanisms we proposed in the JSON draft is, everything that's bundled by media type when data is considered separate media type, or everything is on its own thing. And if we think we need more than that, let's have that discussion now, because I think those three things should be sufficient.
I actually want to answer a question about the use case.
Roman,
Roman.
remember the name, because
Roman.
remember everyone that nobody on the remote can see you, so they can't recognize you by face.
Roman speaking. Just want to explain why we need video basically bundled separately from audio. The case would be screen sharing, where you can actually delay the screen update, but you don't want to for audio to continue to flow at essentially higher priority. And with, again, screen sharing, for instance, on slide changes, you get those bundles of video packets. Like basically, you get very kind of spiky traffic, which
Use the mic.
I'm not arguing you shouldn't be able to decouple video from audio. I'm saying that attempting to select which of video and audio the data channel is attached to seems extraordinarily silly.
Justin Uberti, it's not clear to me why sending audio and video over different 5 tuples would actually lead to any different behavior. You know, if there's a network congestion thing, dumping all these packets on at once will cause the same problems. But Magnus sounds like he has some ideas.
So Magnus Westland, in a wireless network where you have QoS based on flows, yes, that's the case.
Yeah, so Justin Uberti, so if we're doing QoS based on flows, like that totally makes sense. But like, you know, flow-based QoS is the only reason I see right now for doing this.
So let me just conclude this one, which is, it sounded like the 3 cases that were in JSUP today meant the cases everyone was concerned about, right? Krister, that's sort of to you. Okay, and do we need to modify these requirements here in any way to line up with what's already proposed in JSUP?
So I got strong suggestions that the middle bullet, media streams group by type, should be a must.
Okay, can we take that as a conclusion out of this conversation?
The one I would like to have show of hands is something. It's about the data channel. Is it necessary to have a control surface that says data channel is bundled with something else, or data channel is not bundled with something else?
So what I heard on that, and let me just correct me if anyone tells me wrong, is there is a need for the data channel to be considered its own media type, so that if you're not bundling audio media types together, data is not bundled with audio and is not bundled with video. But there's no need for a control surface beyond that level of granularity.
Okay, so let's so for the bullet described and the second bullet, media streams grouped by type, should we have the possibility of saying bundle data with another media type? Anyone saying yes to that? Anyone saying no to that? No. Okay. I hear that we have.
Am I in the room?
Who are you?
This is Carl speaking. Am I heard? Yes. What I want to point out, and I've been arguing about, is that it's not data that is in itself that's dangerous to bundle with RTP. It's file transfer type of data when you have an infinite bandwidth hunger to transfer as fast as you can to the other end. That's a totally different type of traffic that should not be put into the same 5-tuple and be prioritized. It cannot be. It should be the routers on the internet has to have the chance to back them up and drop packets just like it does for other file transfer types where you use TCP. So the big separation here is file transfer type of data should not be put in the same data channel and be prioritized or whatever as smaller data chunks can be. So that's
So one problem here is that we don't have multiple data channels, and we don't know what the data channels are going to be used for. But Ecker has comments.
Well, Eric Scola. Okay, but I don't understand what text are you arguing for? Because you've already agreed that you should be able to decouple all three media types, including data, audio, and video into separate transports. So I'm really is there some major advantage to having audio and video bundled and data separate that like I'm missing that necessitates having a more complicated control surface? So I don't understand what he's arguing for.
This is Ted Hardy. I believe what he's arguing for is that you may need more than one data association in order to be able to handle different types of data, some of which are essentially file transfer, buffer bloating, and some of which are not.
And there's a solution. So no, Magnus Westland, if you actually want to have that, what Carl wants, having multiple different transport flows for data channels, open multiple peer connections.
This may be unrelated. I don't want to interrupt this flow. Stefan, yeah, Stefan Wenger. Unrelated, and maybe I'm thick here. Can we, with what the agreement in the room may be, can we separate out the coded media information flows, of which we know that there are hard real-time requirements, and the data channel, and bundle those into one session, and the data channel of which we do not know that there are hard real-time requirements into another, can we do that? Can we bundle all the media channels into one flow and the data channel into another flow based on what we have now? I don't think we can, right?
So at the moment, the suggestion is that this would occur only if you bundle the audio separate from video.
I'm thick, but maybe I'm just thick. The answer is no. The answer to my question was no, right? We cannot do that. I think that is useful. I really believe that it is useful to have all the media data in one flow, tucked away, and the data channel somewhere else.
Christoph, just to, I think we need to say what we mean when we say media, because sometimes some people, when they speak, data channel is media, but no, when you speak, data channel is not media. So we need to make sure what we mean when we say media. Do we refer to audio and video only, or do we refer to audio, video, and data? Because I think what's on the screen there, when it says media streams group by type, that also includes the data channel. So, well. So, but when you talked about media, you did not include the data channel. You talked about audio and video. So we need to make sure what media is.
Ted Hardy speaking / having a question. So as I think Ecker put it a few minutes ago, in what you have here, you can have video media in one, audio media in another, and data in a third. Because you're going to, in addition to having this multiplexing, then apply other things like priority, I'm really wondering why you would want then to have video and audio combined into a single multiplexing and data channel separate. You're going from 3 to 2. Is that really that important to you? And can you explain why?
So, because the traffic characteristics of what commonly is understood as media, and that's audio and video only for someone like me. Yeah, what goes over, that's actually an extremely good characterization there. What goes over RTP, the traffic characteristic of that is known that it must be real time, right? Whereas that data channel stuff, it's either unknown or even it is known that it must not necessarily be real time. So yes.
So I guess one of the questions that I failed to get out correctly is because the characteristics of audio and video are significantly different, it seems like by requiring them to be multiplexed separately from the data channel, you're also requiring them to be treated together. And I'm wondering if that's, if there's really an advantage to having them, all the audio multiplexed together, all the video multiplexed together, but the two, well, so the first one here is each media stream is on its own. The second is grouped by type, so you get all audio together, all video together, and data channel together. But you're arguing that audio and video should be also grouped together and data channel separate. And your reason for that is because they're all RTP, and therefore the RTP mechanisms for handling it will be uniform. Is that a fair summary? Okay, so I was trying to summarize. If I didn't summarize, can you try again?
What I would like to see, this is Carl speaking, is really everything should be bundled together because that's good for firewall traversal and everything else. And also good for the routers, everything that is of the type that it is real-time stream or data that you send periodically, but not file transfer. That's a data type that I want to exclude from this bundle. Everything else is fine bundling together. That should fit the pipe and be sort of prioritized. But the file transfer, when you have it, an amount of data that's supposed to go over as fast as possible, that normally takes what's left of the bandwidth. You fill that up with the file transfer, but it's not prioritized. That type of traffic should not be bundled. And that's the dangers for if you start prioritizing that and sending DHCP bits out on that, the routers will puke in the network.
Thank you. I think your point has been heard.
So I was just, this is Stefan Håkansson. I was going to comment to Stefan Weng, why not open two peer connections, one for the audio video and another for the data.
Fair Scorla, I haven't heard any support from this outside Carl. Can you call for consensus, please?
One more comment to relay from the Jabber room from Randall Jessup. He says, we have priority within individual data channels on the association. If you want further distinction, use Magnus's solution. Given the control flow with split media types versus combined, I think this is sufficient.
So, Carl, before we call for consensus on this, I mean, are you fine with that? I mean, I think this I think people said they have the mechanism to do what you want here by just using different peer connections.
Yeah, I think the mechanism is here if you can sort of open a separate data channel for the file transfer, but will users do that? And will they do not prioritize it? I mean, the programmers.
Right. So Harold, it sounds like the conclusion of this conversation, I think, for the minutes is that middle May is changing to a must, but that's it? Is that your takeaway from this conversation?
My takeaway is that the middle May changes to a must and with unbundled data.
Right.
So all the use cases for other configurations seem to be possible to achieve by using multiple peer connections, and we don't have to mess up the API surface or the implementation with more ways to do it until they have proven the need for them in the field.
Chris, so just for a minute. So basically, we have three options. You don't bundle anything. You bundle my media type, and when I say media type, you know, data channel, or you bundle everything together. That's a three different options. Okay.
Okay, so let's give this another 2 minutes and then move on, just because we're already over time for Harold's total presentation. But I was
afraid of that.
Yeah, I apologize. Gary Mundy, I'm Qualcomm Innovation Center. If the middle bullet becomes a must, how can we interpret that as being a requirement now to the W3C to provide API service to enable this? Because we know what the solution is today, which is SDP munging, in order to get that to work.
I'm sure the chairs of the working group will have heard the request.
Thank you.
Another question, Stefan Wenger, quick question for understanding, hopefully. Is it understood that if we keep the media streams separate, that the fact that relates to a media stream is kind of included in that media stream?
The FAC, forward error correction?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
One more. Last comment.
Uwe Rauschenbach, just a question for clarification. So is the conclusion then that we would have two bundles, one for audio, one for video, plus another M line for the data?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. HTTP Connect. The thing is, this is a mechanism that works today. This is a mechanism that is useful in some configurations. This is a mechanism for which there is no specification. This is a mechanism for which there is no, as far as I know, IETF working group working to make a specification. So 2017 that says what? Oh, HTTP Connect is the standard HTTP mechanism. So the pieces that are left are not specified there. Are kind of, what do you tell the firewall to say this is RTCWEB, and how do you find that damn firewall anyway? Because there's no the question is, does this issue need to be addressed?
So this is a modification to term, and I think it's in the TRAM working group. I think that's where it was sent, right?
I have not. I don't remember the charter of TRAM offhand. Can anyone say if it's in scope or not?
And I do want to say, too, there's this constant implication that without this, you don't work through firewalls. That is false. ICE works very well through a lot of firewalls. It's configured through this. A lot of the techniques that we are doing in this working group help you work through lots of firewalls. Not all firewalls. This will not work through all firewalls either. And there's a lot of issues around this. It's not just, oh, it needs someone to specify. You understand the issues. But it needs a place where it's going to be discussed. We formed a mailing list for that, separate from this working group, which got very little interest or follow-up on it. And then I believe that was moved to the working group that's responsible for the protocol that would be modified to add this. So I'm surprised to see the slide.
Yeah, ditto. I was going to say something else, but that's sufficient.
So is anyone wanting to speak for the TRAM working group?
So Justin Uberti. So what I know is going on inside TRAM is that we were working on the actual proxy finding mechanism, or the actual finding that an enterprise turn server mechanism. It's expected that the actual proxy finding mechanism will be done using the existing de facto proxy finding mechanisms, whether that's PAC files or the I forget what it's called right now, but the thing that is used for WPAD, auto discovery mechanism. And just to be specific, what this is used for and where things don't work unless you have this is when your internet access is forced to go through a proxy. And if you're forced to go through a proxy, unless we have some way of actually sending the media through the proxy, WebRTC is not going to work. And this, while this is largely a political and not a technical discussion, no changes to HTTP Connect are actually needed for this to actually work.
There you go. Well, Justin's gonna make sure nobody else can talk. Yeah, Eric Scorla. I mean, I have no problem. So this is gonna be your frame for me this week. I have no problem with at some point in the future having a pointer to some document which is output by somebody about how to do this stuff. But that seems different from having it be a levy on RTCWEB implementations or be something we have to finish now. So I don't understand. I don't understand why we're discussing this today. Can we be done?
Hi, Andy Hutton. I think the reason why we discuss this is because we have a specific requirement in the use case and requirements document that we work through firewalls in scenarios where you have to traverse a proxy. So there is a specific requirement in the use case document.
Well, that's excellent because
for
this doesn't do that. So can we stop talking about it now?
What do you mean, why it doesn't do it?
Well, it doesn't work through my firewall. I've tried it.
Yeah, we know it doesn't work for all firewalls.
Excellent. Can we stop talking about it?
So, look,
It's a modification to turn. We have given a reasonable place to go and discuss this.
No, it's not a modification to turn. We had that specific requirement for this case taken out of the TRAM working group charter because of your objections, I believe.
It's not, Justin Birdie, it's not a modification to turn. You could use this with ICE TCP or basically any TCP-based protocol, whether it's turn TCP or ICE TCP or whatever.
So let me make sure I understand the semantics of what you're looking for. The semantics you're looking for are, you want to be able to issue a command similar to the existing connect to an HTTP proxy, which specifies by URI or some other mechanism that what you're talking to is not an HTTP web server, but has some other set of semantics. Is that approximately correct?
So let me just sort of back up a little bit. What HTTP Connect does, it says, given this host name, establish me a TCP tunnel to that host name. And so like that's used for TLS because then like the TLS stuff goes over that tunnel. And in this case, like the actual turn TLS, turn TCP, or ICE TCP traffic would go over the same tunnel.
Right, and so is what I understood you need from that is if what we're talking about is TLS and you're using an HTTPS proxy that's going to take a connect method and give you a TLS bearer to the other side.
TCP bearer, but yeah.
Well, so in this case, you're still going to have it over TLS.
No,
right?
it won't be over TLS because it's no encryption. It's just give me a TCP socket to the outside.
Okay, so I fundamentally misunderstood a part of this. So what you're looking for here is to not have the TLS layer that it would normally give you.
It does not give you normally it only gives you a TCP socket to the outside, and since TLS is end to end, TLS then runs from the client to the actual web server.
Right, and so so not in a lot of the reality here, but let's go back to this. So what's going to happen there is if you're going to do that. It has to know what you're sending it to in order to make the policy decision of whether or not to allow it, right?
Some days.
Some days, right? I mean, that's
and so what it may be expecting if it's getting a connect is that what you're trying to do is a TLS connection to a particular TLS host, right? An HTTP speaking over TLS. And so the question is, how do I tell the proxy that that's not what I'm going to do here and I'm going to do this other thing? Is that approximately correct?
I mean, if people think that's important, great. I'm not going to lose sleep if that doesn't exist.
Well, but
that's
really the question. If what you have now is HTTP connect and it allows you to specify where you're going, it seems like you're done unless what you want is to be able to tell it that the semantics of what you want out of what it's giving you are different from the semantics that it's expecting.
Right now, the existing semantics seem to work well enough that I would like to see, like, basically what I want is, as an application developer, to know that browsers will actually support this.
Browsers are proxies.
No, this is Roman. Let me try to explain. We're actually not talking about proxies. Proxies, at least some of them work with this right now. What we're looking for are essentially extensions for turn and extensions for ICE TCP.
Oh.
No, I'm just saying that we basically need to, for the turn or ICE TCP, it needs to go through the extra handshake for this candidate to connect through a proxy. We need to specify that it needs to go through the proxy, or it needs to find the proxy. And
my head hurts. So let's try to take a step back. The existing state of play is that there are proxies in the network which only let you punch out TCP connections, only let you punch them out probably on 443 or 80. And if you want to, and if you want to do TLS, the way that works is you tell the proxy, make me a TCP channel, an untouched TCP channel to the remote end, probably on 443. Then maybe you get away some other port, and then you send TLS over that. And what we're talking about here is having, and by the way, the browser already knows this fact because that's how he's transiting TLS out of the network, right? So what we're talking about here is, in the minimal case, the browser merely being smart enough to connect to the proxy and attempt to use a same hole punching mechanism to use whatever TCP externalized thing it does, whether that is turn or turn TLS or whatever it is, right? Or ICE TCP, right? So that's the minimal thing we're discussing here. Now, now in many cases, those proxies are also protocol inspection and enforcement points. And so in some of those cases, they will attempt to verify that you're doing TLS, or they will attempt to do packet pacing or other shit and attempting to verify that you're doing HTTPS. And on those or they may be in the middle proxy. And in those circumstances, it might be the case that this mechanism would not work, and then you would have to tell the proxy, oh, listen, by the way, I'm RTCWEB, and then it might or might not permit you to get through, right? But you could do these things separately. You could merely tell the browser, dear browser, if you happen to know you're behind a 2817 connect proxy, that is how you should establish extra HTTP connections, and with no protocol mechanisms. That you could do.
Okay, so the question I have there is really the issue you mentioned before of 80 or 443, right? Because it seems like if you could issue a connect right now to the specified ports in ICE-TCP and it works, then you're done, right? And the problem is, if it's improbable that it won't work because the local domain administrators didn't want it to work, then specifying something that allows it to basically reuse 443 for this does seem to be basically the internet runs over, all of the internet runs over 443, whether it's actually TLS or not. And it's a bit more worrying for me to say that this is now going to be ICE-TCP over 443 as a... Okay, well, so let me go back to your statement then. As long as what you're doing is a connect request to the specified ports appropriate for what you're connecting to, I think you're done. It's only in the case where you're not doing that, but you're using a different port that it's, and Roman, I think the bits you want are all in tram, not this. But I think that's the semantics of this.
What I'm saying is, it's actually not. It doesn't work. It does work for other ports as well. You can specify the port specifier on the URL. It goes and connects to another port. It doesn't have to be port 443. Again, it's all we're talking about essentially like sub 1% of all the connect cases, except for some people who are sitting in the walled gardens for whom that's basically going to be making 100% of their calls. But it's not the port selection issue. It's essentially telling the browser use that mechanism it already knows about to make those to make the TCP connection it uses for the for WebRTC related TCP connections.
So again, I believe that this is out of scope for this working group, as we've talked about before. And the issues that people get at here has to do with if there was a mechanism that the proxy, and keep in mind the SOCKS proxy is not there to relay TCP connections, it's there to relay HTTP connections. And now we're going to be using it for a different protocol, RTP, which has much higher data rates with much faster packets with much lower latency requirements than was ever designed for in most deployments. The question is, are you defeating firewall administrators' intents? Now, if the proxy signaled to you, yes, this is fine to do on the proxy, that would be all, I have no problem with this, and it used the standard turn port instead of 443. I mean, and that was what Ted was getting at too. Are you circumventing the firewall administrators' rules? But if we start just doing this to the proxies, you thinking that it will work and we can make it work, you are forcing an escalation where they block it from working if they don't want it to work, and that results in damage to other parts of the web that aren't us, right? And I think that's really the issue we need to get around to. And again, this is not the working group to discuss that whole topic.
Okay, so we established that TRAM has explicitly have taken this out of the charter.
That was not my read of the charter, but who knows? I'm not asserting I remember what the charter says.
It was possibly in before you objected.
Yeah, it's not in the TRAM charter.
And we established that there doesn't seem to be any good argument for having it in the RTCWEB charter. So I think we should kick this upstairs to the ISG. Hey, let's do some steering here.
I think that would be. It's really not pleasant to watch you turn, Sean, to use the word. So this stuff was not listed as a deliverable in the current charter. I could not speak to whether it is impossible for it to be in for TRAM. And I could not speak to whether it's impossible for it to be chartered, part of that charter. I was just saying it's not not listed as one of the deliverables these days. So we can, we can have that conversation. Speaking only for myself, when we were chartering TRAM, we had a whole bunch of stuff that says, basically, we want to do this, that we knew what this was for various values of the word this. And this was kind of an outlier because we didn't really have a clear description of what people wanted to do. So a clear description would help us figure out what to do with it from a steering perspective, whether that was TRAM or someplace else. I'll head the microphone down.
So speaking,
that was Spencer Dawkins speaking this time as the responsible area director for TRAM, as opposed to being the irresponsible area director most of the time.
and this is Richard Barnes speaking not as Randall Jessup this time, but as the irresponsible area director for TRAM. For RTCWEB, yes. I think my take on this is that the TRAM charter seems like it could be, something like this may be, the language is broad enough that something like this may be importable into the current charter language just as a milestone. I think if we were going to do some recharting, the only real question would be this question of how we deal with circumvention. And I think the answer there, we don't want this to be a firewall circumvention device. So I think that this issue of disclosing what we're doing it will be something that will have to be addressed.
I've lost the queue.
Okay, so it sounds to me, speaking as chair, like the action item to hand it up to the IASG has been accepted by the IASG. And so always be closing, right? So there needs to be further discussion of how and when.
And I'm just making sure that all the area directors are circled with their backs to each other over here. But yes, so my suggestion would be definitely send us something if this matters, so that we can understand what it is we're being asked to consider. But that sounds like a plan to, is that 1/3 of the area directors that are in the room?
So is that the chair's closing the discussion?
And I can at least agree on what it is we're asking ISG. Yes.
Well, yes.
Do you have a proposal?
Yes, I have an exact proposal.
Give the man a mic.
So what I'm hearing is that the overall mechanism, which I've already said doesn't need any changes. The thing that we think should be done is there is a way that we sort of say, hey, we're asking to HTTP connect, and we're going to run RTCWEB traffic over this. And if the proxy decides to say, oh no, I don't support that, then that's communicated back to the endpoint, and it is not to use that mechanism. And that's the only thing we need to actually standardize and do. Obviously, but I mean, that's the only piece of work that we actually need to do. And then we can sort of take that as a dependency here and saying browsers once this mechanism is implemented must support using HTTP connect. It's not a turn thing. This you can be used with ICE-TCP. This is the RTCWEB transports thing. That if we're going to support using turn, we're going to support using ICE-TCP. We also need to support using these TCP-based mechanisms through TCP-based proxies.
So frankly, I could care whether it says browsers must do it or not, because if I can shave off 0.5% of success, I'm going to do it, and so are you. So I can care what it says. What the only thing that it needs to say, frankly, is the opposite, which is that browsers who do this must also generate this indicia saying RTCWEB if and when that indicia is standardized. But I mean, trying to nail the browsers down to doing this, we have so much incentive to do it, we're going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're going to ship this, but I'd like to do it in a sanctioned way. And this sounds like getting this.
I forget.
indication thing is the one thing we need to do to get there.
So I think this horse is safely dead now.
Yeah, so it sounds like the action is actually not on the IESG, but on somebody to propose an action, to propose, write a quick draft specking this out and send it to TRAM or.
Not TRAM's charter, so we need to stop that.
I think the way to approach this is to send a proposal to the TRAM working group to say we would like to RTCWEB thinks this is necessary to get the Connect working. Can we do this here, or does it need to be elsewhere?
But I thought we agreed that this was not, a minute ago, this was not a TRAM issue. Yeah.
Okay.
So
These people will sort that one out. I think it's their job.
yeah, and starting with a proposal that we can point people to will be the critical part of this. Like I said, that was what I think we were missing when we were doing the TRAM charter in the first place. So we'd appreciate that a lot.
Okay. So with that, I think I'm done. So I'll go back and update the document with the things that we decided and leave pointers to the things we didn't. And I think that would, in my opinion, that means the document is close to ready for last call. So get your nets in.
I just want to have one question for a minute's clarification, because someone says, so does the working group, the RTCWEB working group, agree that this is needed? And the question is now then, whether it's going to be done in TRAM or somewhere else. Because there was someone here just saying by the microphone that, yeah, RTCWEB should tell TRAM, we need this. But I really never got that. Do you have a requirement that this is needed? And the question is now, where is it going to be done? Or are we still discussing whether we need this? Just one for a minute. If it's clear, just give me. Okay, so give me text.
I think what's like, to be clear, people are going to do this. So all that's needed is some message from someone that either TRAM or an individual ought to write up a draft indicating how you indicate to 2817 what the type of the data you're about to shove over it is, and that should include some indicator for RTCWEB. I don't care where it happens because I don't actually care if it happens.
What needs to happen next in both ADs, and they know?
So.
Great.
That needs to go in.
Okay. I'm just bringing this up so I have my notes. So we're trying something new here. Oh, okay. Is that better?
Yeah, or if there's
oh, that'd be even better. So Martin, don't they usually have two screens, one with the text and one with the issue? What's our usual procedure here? Is that possible? Can we have a second screen?
I can, yeah, I can. This is a full screen share, so whatever shows on my desktop will show.
Okay, great.
So I can.
Right. So why don't you scroll to the bottom and we'll see how it goes. Great. So we're trying something new here, which is this is how HTTP plays the game, that is everything becomes a GitHub issue, and then we just go through the issue list rather than having people produce slides that contain the issue list. I went through the draft and filed a bunch of a pile of open issues, I took everything that was an open issue and made it an issue, and then I went through the draft myself and filed a bunch of issues myself. And so I just want to go through these, let's see. Let's start. Let's not worry about some of these in the bottom. Can you start here, please? Number 8. Sorry, my mistake. Back. We don't want that. That I don't want. Number 7. So you're in the remote PR answer state. So in general, you're allowed to make offers anytime you like, at least sometimes. But you're in the remote PR answer state, and the question is, can you create an offer? And I think Justin's answer here is, well, maybe, but you can't do anything with it, so it's not very useful. I guess I'm trying to get to the point where tightening down what you're allowed to do and exactly in what circumstances. So you can create an offer here, but so is that right now? Yeah. So I guess I don't really have a proposal. I could live with Justin suggests, namely that you can create an offer, but you can't pass it to set description. But frankly, that seems pretty silly. So I can also live with you're not allowed to do it at all and turn it's an error. I mean, this goes back to sort of, I guess, conceptual question with the spec is, do we think that you should be allowed to just do things that don't make any sense? We'll put this as an example. Yes.
I don't think we should do that. The problem is if we would allow to do this and you would actually create a new offer, then the question is at some point you're gonna call set answer. And is that then the answer to the original offer or the offer that you created when you get the per answer? I think there should be to one offer, there should be one answer and not trying to do anything between. If you want to do things like prac or updates, you don't use per answer. I mean, this is something we discussed as part of the, forking discussion and everything where we decided, no, let's use different, pair connections and everything instead. So my suggestion to this is no.
Colin Jennings as an individual. I mean, this is basically a programming error, and it's going to result in further errors because you won't be able to correlate the answers with the right offer. So I just think that we should, generate an error of some type when this happens here as a logical thing to do.
And I think Justin's going to disagree just as much as I am, Martin Thompson. So the concern here is that we have things that do stuff, which is set local description and set remote description, and things that don't really do things except for this whole reservation thing that the create offer thing does. And that's what gives me pause. But otherwise, I agree with Justin. If someone can convince me that you aren't able to reserve the necessary resources that you need to have the offer be actionable when it's received, then I'm perfectly okay with leaving this as Justin suggested.
I can't even tell what Justin suggested.
Yeah, I'm suggesting that create offer doesn't really do anything except, reserve what resources are needed for the offer. And so having that API fail in certain states seems like it's actually more complicated than just having it do whatever. I mean, you might use create offer for, capabilities discovery or something else, and having that API not work some of the time, it just seems odd.
But the problem is those resources that are reserved, when you do, basically you're going to have 2 mallocs and 1 free. And you're going to have no way to ever free the resources that were reserved in one of those 2 things.
Well, the create offer resources are reserved if you don't actually set local description on them. And so like as soon as that callback completes on the create offer, that would be freed. So there'll be 2 frees.
This gets back to the allocation model. So yes, as Justin suggests, the allocation guarantees for validity of resources allocated in create offer only extend through the callback return for create offer. And so I think he's implying. So I think you're saying at that point it can be GC. It can be GC, though. Who knows when they'll be GC? They'll preserve. I mean, most likely when the thing returns. But
I mean, we're in remote answer, so we've already done a set local, and we've got a PR remote answer from the far end already, right?
Right.
And then
I guess consider the following example, right?
Right.
I do a create offer with an audio, and I send the offer, and I set local, and now the audio is like fully reserved, and I do send it out, and then I take the answer back, and the answer back is a PR answer, right? And then I add a video, and I do a new create offer, right? And so if I never call set local, then that video resources are only guaranteed to exist basically during that callback, and they vanish again.
No, they're not guaranteed to be destroyed at that callback. They're
Guaranteed to be
guaranteed to exist during that callback, but the implementations of lots of the translators to other things are doing a sort of different model. I don't know. Okay, so I get what you're saying. So you're saying this would be no harm if you freed those resources right at the end of that callback.
I'm saying that was correct. Now, that isn't to say that, I mean, as a practice.
So what is the use case for doing that? This is a discovery type thing?
And what would happen if you called set local in this space? Then you get an error.
Well, I mean, then error because you're in the wrong state. You know, you're in the have PR answer state, and you can't stuff in a new offer at that point.
Oh, okay. I think I can live with the error happening at that stage. Then I think that sort of addresses what I was concerned about.
Okay.
So the only thing that I realized, Martin Thompson again, sorry, during this discussion here was that since you can't actually act upon the offer during that period, it's potentially valid for the browser not to do any reservation whatsoever in this state. But that's all. Otherwise, we're fine.
For sure.
Thanks. So just for clarification, when we do call create offer, even if you add your new video there, it's not going to start doing anything ICE or candidate collection or anything until you actually call set local description. Is that correct?
That's already been defined in JSEP, yeah.
Okay, not just
guarantee. Okay, Martin, Martin, can I get you to do the usual thing and edit these issues as they come up? So I believe that the issue here, that this issue is resolved as Justin suggests, namely, yes, you can do this, but it generates an error. You call set local. I don't know if you want to do. This might need a pull request, Martin, but at least needs a note. I mean, that'd be great too. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Ted, can I get you to go back to yeah, on screen. Oh, good. Okay. So number 11. In fact, if I can just, yeah, I'm just going to filter ICE in a second here. So you can do by topic. So there's a general series of issues here having to do with the timing and existence of candidates appearing in ICE messages. Sorry, candidates appearing in SDP. And so to recap people, we had a long discussion in London about trickle ICE versus create offer. And currently, so in previous versions of JSEP, the way things worked was you call create offer, and ICE gathering only started at the point where you called set local. However, we've recently added this candidate pool concept, and so the consequence is that you could have candidates available to you at the point where you call create offer because they've been preemptively gathered. And you can actually see this in Firefox, which starts gathering right away, and as a consequence, the candidates are available at create offer time prior to calling set local. And I thought we'd agreed in London that we were no longer going to, there's no longer any acceptable behavior, and the first create offer had to contain 0 candidates. And my understanding is actually that Cullen does not believe we agreed this, and so we can debate it. But so maybe you can start with that point because all this sort of falls out from that. I guess one thing I will say is that the behavior is a little weird here in that the only create offer which never has any candidates is the one before you call set local the first time, because as soon as you call set local, I mean the point being that that sort of the way you do non-trickle ICE is that you call create offer, then you call set local, and then you wait for the on-ICE candidate null. And at that point, you know the candidates are available. And at that point, you call either you examine the local candidate, the local description property, or you call create offer. And in either case, so that create offer has candidates in it. So it's only the first one that has no candidates in it.
No, with one exception, if you do an ICE restart, then that offer generated for the ICE restart will also have 0 candidates.
Quite so, yes.
Okay, so let's just walk through I think that the practical, the only time this really makes a real relevant difference, and maybe you guys have a clever fix to make this a non-issue. But imagine I have a pool with like 3 things in it, and I need like 5 things, and I support trickle ICE. Okay. So what my code looks like right now is I call the create offer, okay, and I'm hoping to get as many things as I possibly can get quickly, and I call set local. Then I send that offer to the other side, and as each trickle ice candidate comes up, I send it to the other side. Now, what I don't want to do is, and the fact that I sent that initial one, what I want to try and avoid is having tons of round trips on this, and I'm still waiting for things, you know, do I have a timer that I like wait 2 seconds waiting to see if some more trickle ice shows up quickly before I send the offer with the round trip? Because you don't want a ton of round trips back and forth across on this. That just slows things down.
Are we talking about round trips or are we talking about number of messages? Because these things can be back to back. They don't have to be wait for a round trip and an ACK.
Right, number of messages. Okay, so those are flowing over as you get them. But I didn't get why. What I'm seeing in people writing code right now is if your code is you don't do trickle ice and you wait till everything arrives, no problem. Okay, but if your code is you're doing an HTTP REST transaction for each, maybe overlapped. Okay, for each one of these, that's a lot of transactions, and people are going, well, no, I'm just going to time and wait for 5 seconds until I get all of these. And it would be really convenient to know that you didn't have to run a timer, that whatever was in the pool you could send right away when you got the create offer. I'm just not seeing the motivation for, and it doesn't matter if it happened after the set local. If immediately after the set local, I could ask for the SDP representation and I got everything for all the pool candidates and could just send that for the 3 that were there, that would be fine.
Let me see if I can restate what I think you just said, which is that your concern is that the current text, you don't know that there are a bunch of candidates that are already available, and you don't know when you've gotten all those candidates because they're just being called in callback timers.
So let me make a proposal that the success callback for set local fires, but after any pooled candidates are emitted.
Oh, that seems very dangerous because because now what's going to happen if you think about the natural implementation of these stacks is to send each offer each value as soon as it's ready, and so what's going to happen now is the candidates are going to their side, there won't be anybody there because they won't have seen the offer yet.
Actually, maybe somebody can just help me understand. What's the motivation for not having the pool candidates you already know in the offer, I guess? Maybe I'm just missing the goal for that.
I mean, the idea was that, you know, you now have different behaviors for, instead of getting everything through on ice candidate, you now get some things at different times than other things, depending on whether you have the pool or not. And the pool is intended to be an optimization, not something that would change the actual API flow. Things go faster when you use the pool, but you don't have APIs that work differently.
I can say that we get complaints about Firefox. People say, why isn't Firefox calling on ice candidate? Because they're expecting it to do Chrome always does. So I'm not saying it's a slam dunk argument, but we do get complaints about this.
Right. I mean, would a solution to that making it you still call the on ice callback for all the candidates that are in there anyway? I mean, particularly when we're talking about like host candidates and stuff, this is wacky to not include them.
Well, I mean, I think the reason why you don't want to necessarily require host candidates to be in the offer is that, you know, there could be IPC stuff or on mobile, it could take like non-zero time. And so if your goal is to get, you know, SDP stuff out as fast as possible for the offer, like you want to do that and then still even have the host candidates come in through trickle.
So I mean, I certainly would not want to require host candidates to be fed into trickle. Sorry, to be in the offer. I think what you're saying, I think, is that, I mean, so I think it's a pretty clearly defined set of which candidates are available at the time the create offer is called, right? And you just pose one mechanism for delineating those, which I don't like, but I mean, like, we do know what the answer to that question is. So it's not impossible we can have some way of delineating those. That's not undefined, right?
Yeah. So Martin Thompson, I'm thinking that Cullen's suggestion is somewhat attractive. The only concern there is that when an application then you give them an offer that it contains everything that you have at the time that the offer is created, which may be nothing, which may be, you know, in the case that you need to do IPC in order to get the host candidates, but probably will include host candidates in a lot of cases. And then you have an event for every single candidate in existence that follows afterwards. The problem with that is that applications will then see those events and generate messages for them anyway because they're doing so unconditionally. And the other side already has that information. So there's a problem there as well. So I don't think there's a great solution for this either way.
It sounds like what we just need is some sort of indicator that the pool has been drained.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, in fact, we have this indicator. We're using null as the indicator you're done. That's sort of lame. Maybe we just need to put an explicit indicator that tells you the pool's been drained and like I'm done and everything's been drained, right? I mean,
and this has actually come up in a different discussion on the list. That we actually probably should have a ice gathering state callback, and perhaps we need another ice gathering state of dispatching from pool, and then like gathering or something, as two separate states, and you could transition between gathering from pool, gathering from network, and then done.
I think any of those proposals would meet what I wanted. And there was a bunch of different, like any of those would be workable.
So okay, so the suggestion is to have Adam, did you want to say something?
I was coming over to say pretty much what Colin was saying, so.
Okay, so the suggestion is to enhance the state indicators, basically saying to indicate those values. And what would be contained? So Cullen, the SDP would not contain any candidates.
Yeah, that'd be fine. As long as I got the indicator as soon as we emptied the pool, then I would go grab the SDP which contained candidates, right? And then that'd be fine.
Okay, I'm okay with that, but I'm fine with that. Though I think you have a somewhat unreasonable notion of how the browser actually coalesces requests. But okay, like we're going to use WebSockets and Speedy. It's just not that expensive to do these XHRs. But
No. So the cost of deploying the service is directly proportional, really, to the number of messages it processes, right? It's not the cost of browser issue; it's cost of server issue. I pay for servers, not browsers, dude. That's your problem.
Not super convinced by that.
What Colin said is actually
I pay for servers.
pretty pertinent if you're
Ever heard of Google App
operating a
Engine?
server.
Yeah, but I understand you have an unlimited account.
Not unlimited.
Nigh unlimited.
This is Adam Roach. I just wanted to poke real quick at something that you were saying, Colin, about your solution there. If we were to do it that way, would it be allowable to have host candidates in the initial offer? Or is this just...
I think Justin's arguing for never, just as a simplicity.
So basically, the initial offer is always going to have no IP address information at all.
So I certainly do not want to discriminate. I certainly do not want to attempt to discriminate at this layer between host and other kinds of candidates, because you bear in mind that that the PC, that if there's any time delay at all between the PC construction and the create offer, and it's especially not likely to create answer, because you may very well have have a consent query right in the middle there. That it's actually quite probable that you're going to have server reflexive candidates available at the same time too. I mean, it only takes 200 milliseconds to gather a lot of candidates, right?
Yes, this is true, but I mean, functionally, we were already treating host candidates as different because of the way ICE works, right? They appear as part of the M line typically.
The C line typically is actually the relay candidate.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, or stun or something. Your default candidate.
Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, the reason we wanted this to work as fast as possible, so we said, hey, put in like dummy candidates, and then they'll fill in as candidates are actually gathered with what an appropriate default candidate will be. So the initial offer has the 0.0.0.0 and like port 1 type stuff, as that's all defined in the trickle ICE draft.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
The text, by the way, somewhere.
Just about, I think that's, I mean, this is a comment towards trickle ICE, but since we're doing stuff well out the scope of this working group, I mean, SDP with 0.0.0 and it means something very specific. And
It's all been discussed in trickle ICE.
Okay.
I think it's called the null.
Null address is like IPv6 : or whatever.
There's some hack we figured out.
Okay.
So just to be clear, is local description and create offerings are now in synchrony, right? Namely that if I call create offer repeatedly, if I wait for an on-ice candidate and then I call create offer, should that have the candidate in it?
Yeah, everything since the last ICE restart that's been given to you, should appear in create offer.
That's perfectly satisfactory. I just want to be, we know what to write, right? I think that's what, I believe that is what it says. Or based on my reading of the issue, it sort of said that, but it
That's the
wasn't quite
comment
there.
I added.
Okay, great. Okay, great.
So I think we also want to take the action to, well, this is for probably this afternoon, but add an explicit on ICE gathering state changed callback.
Right. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Martin, can you
Yes,
can you clarify
since the
this?
last ICE restart, yes.
I see what you have, but okay. I added my own comment. Okay, so that issue, Martin, is there a good way to deal with these? These aren't closed. Is there a way to deal with these so that they have so I don't keep looking back at them as I try to go through the list? Good. Can you mark that editor ready, please? Great. So now issue number 12. You can just put a 12 on the end of that one, Ted. So I believe this is actually resolved, but well, semi-resolved. So basically, the current spec, basically, there's a conflict between the WebRTC spec and the RTCWEB spec and the JSF spec. The JSF spec says that the default pool size is 0, and the WebRTC spec says it's something which might or may not be 2. I believe what we came to the conclusion of is that the default is unspecified and that the browser it's up to the browser's discretion to do it. Is that the consensus that we came to?
That's fine with me, with the convention that, but there is a way for the JavaScript to change the default, right, for a peer connection.
Right. So we need to add a variable to the RTC configuration, and by default, the browser can have that as whatever it feels like it, and you can find that out by calling get configuration.
Okay, I'm making a note of that now. Oh, I wish you know you're doing. Oh, Bo, please. I just didn't like your previous note. No, please. No, I didn't. Did I hit reload or something? Is that the problem? Okay. Well, no, please do, Martin. You're doing great. Okay. So I believe that is now it already. But there's also I don't know. Colin, can you remember you have to change the WebRTC spec?
I think it's missing the thing to set it. We'll fix it in the WebRTC
okay. But
spec, yeah.
also you may want to fix this too. I don't know. Like, I mean,
it'll go away, right? It'll say that there's no.
Right.
Yeah. I'll open a bug.
That's right. Okay. Issue number 18. I think I'll bring up 18, but I think it's actually pretty straightforward. So there's like all this stuff in here that sort of implies that there actually are candidates in create offer, but we have to make sure that this matches up with what we just agreed, and with initial offer never has any candidate lines. I'll fix this, but if anybody thinks that that this needs something more than just text editing, let me know. I just mark it at already, Martin. Right. Number 17. Okay. So there's been a bunch of discussion like this in the list about the ICE credentials. So the current specification is extremely normative about, so it's background for people. ICE allows you to have media level or session level credentials. So this text basically tells you that if you're bundling, obviously you have to have the same credentials in every M line. And if you're not bundling, it says to have different credentials in every M line. And it's actually quite as you can see, it's a 2119 must, not just a suggestion. So it's not clear to me what the benefit of this is, since it's explicitly permitted in ICE to share them all. Oh, you're turning Krister. So there's some discussion on the list. I don't know if people want to recap their positions. What's the benefit of this? Is there any?
So the main benefit I see right now, this is Justin Uberti, is that the ICE UFrag password tuple then allows you to uniquely identify, basically an ICE media stream. And that, if you want to have a handle to identify that in stats, like that gives you an identifier where otherwise there is none.
But unless I'm missing something, doesn't this basically make frozen not work? Because these are different ICE contexts?
I'm not sure that it creates a separate ICE context. I mean, I think you'd still have the same freezing things because they're still in the same grouping, they're still in the same SDP. And so the freezing would proceed in M-line order. I don't see any downside. I think that the arguments expressed in the list were that interoperability, oh, sorry, that was different. That was a different issue. There's a thing where bundle was better with this before. I think that's been changed based on the bundle design. So the only thing remaining here is that it actually provides like an identifier for an ICE media stream.
So Harald Alström, one thing I never understood about ICE is that if you have multiple outstanding queries to another ICE, to another endpoint, and you get peer reflexive candidates back, that is, the other guy is sending from addresses you didn't expect. How do you identify them if they have the same how do you sort them out if you have the same ICE UFrag and password?
By transaction ID.
Okay, that will work. Thank you.
Right, like if they're from separate M lines, they'll have separate source addresses, even in the bundle case. So you'll never get a response to another M lines query.
That sounds right too, although, don't you?
It wasn't originally the case though with bundle, which is I think one of the reasons we had to have this.
Right. But this doesn't help with bundle, right? Because we're sharing them all, right?
Well, it did help with bundle when bundle used a single set of ports from the very beginning. Even if you might not.
Right.
But now with bundle, you're either sharing them all or like they're all separate, and so you never have this case.
So actually, can't you have port sharing if you're? I mean, we don't do this, but can't you have port sharing if you're using turn?
You have the same turn port for two different media streams that are not bundled?
I'm trying to remember. We don't do this, but I thought Chrome might.
No, I mean, well, Chrome does do this just because it has a historical version of bundle that has not yet been updated to the new one, but like it causes various issues that will be rectified when we switch to the new bundle.
Okay. Well, I mean, my resistance to this, such as I have resistance, is only that like Firefox doesn't currently do it, so I have to fuck with Firefox. But like that's not a really good reason. I mean, it will make the SDP fractionally larger, but I think the ship kind of sail on that one. I mean, I guess, Cullen, do you know? Does any extant ICE stack care if you do this? Have a problem with this?
I don't know. I mean, that discussion sort of highlighted that probably some people are demuxing based on username and some people demuxing correctly on transaction ID or whatever. I don't really know. I imagine we're going to find some interesting bugs in ICE sooner or later. There's not that many ICE stacks we can go test.
Right. Yeah. Martin, what do you think? Is this a good must? Should it not be a must? What do you think? Okay, the whole point is to close open issues. So let's not do that. Let's like fight it out until I know.
So Martin Thompson, I think we should put the must in. There's nothing saying that some non-compliant peer that may do ICE and doesn't comply with our requirements couldn't use the session level, so we have to be able to expect the session level stuff.
You clearly, right, I mean, this is a requirement that cannot be enforced, right?
Yeah, so we can't do anything special based on the fact that it come in at the session level. We just have to deal with it.
Yeah, you got to be able to
Right.
receive it. The
But-
remote side can do whatever. It's just what should RTCWEB endpoints that are compliant do?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying it's not.
But this is good. I think
Okay.
we should just do it. I don't
Okay.
think it's going to cause any major
I'm satisfied with that. I mean, the first one, the must be for the same for bundle, obviously is a requirement. And that actually sort of ends up with a situation where, you know, where there's a reasonable probability that you'll end up with multiple ones of the same kind anyway that are sort of rejects bundle, right?
Sorry,
If I rejects bundle, you always can end up in a state where you have the same credentials for every MLine. The other side, if you offer a bundle, then you have to have the same credentials for every MLine. And
No, because like you have to presume that you're not going to be using bundle, unless you know. Let's set aside the bundle only discussion for the time being. You know, when you offer bundle, you'll have credentials A with audio and credentials B with video, and then once you actually, you know, get the response back from the other side where it says, "Hey, I'm going to bundle," you end up, you know, sharing all the stuff A for both.
So I had not understood that's what you meant. Okay, so let me see if I understand. Let's see if I can restate this. So you're saying that as an offerer, unless I know for a fact the error guide is bundle, I must comply with the second arm of this must. Sorry, this first arm of this
First
must.
arm,
It's got
yeah.
unique candidates. And so in a typical transaction, then in a typical environment, the offer will contain unique ones and the answer will contain the same ones.
Right.
If they're doing bundle, right?
Right, and then like, you know, there's the third fix-up offer, but like, you know, you'll be using the same A, you know, on both sides, you know, the same credential on both sides by the time you get the answer.
Okay, so that's going to make. Right. Okay.
Okay.
So let me just think this through. So now when we think about ICE restart, I'm just thinking about if I have disparate credentials on multiple M lines.
Now you have new desperate credentials on each M line.
Right. What happens if someone offers me some of the credentials being the same and some being different?
Then you only restart one of the actual meeting lines.
That actually possible since they're
Yeah.
the same ICE.
Well, if they're bundled, you mean?
No, they're not bundled, but
If they're not bundled,
ICE,
yeah,
they're the
then
same
you
ICE, they're the
you
same
might
ICE.
have like one turn server blow up, another one not blow up, and you only want to restart one of them.
Right, but they're in the same ICE context, right? I don't have to
Sure.
divorce the contexts.
But you can restart a single media stream at a time. 5245 allows that. Okay. Like, we don't allow it in the API. There's no API saying only restart one media stream. There's only the ICE restart constraint or dictionary parameter. And so, like, you know, since ICE restart is generally, you know, it's make before break, like, it's not harmful.
Okay. Martin, can you transcribe what we have to do? You should probably make pull requests too, Martin, but you know, I'm not going to make you. The conclusion to summarize is that this text is correct, and but it needs some extra explanation to make clear that this first arm of plot, that when it says bundled, thank you. Yes, exactly so. Okay, great.
I want to mention bundle only as well.
Isn't that in here?
Oh, sorry.
Right. Issue number 23. So we have the same issue. So now we have the reverse of the issue we had before about set local, but now with create answer. So in create offer, because it's not possible to not do trickle, because the API does not permit you not to trickle, we just agreed there's no way that candidates can appear in the offer. However, in create answer, you have the possibility the offer did not contain the trickle indicia, in which case you're not trickling. And so now the question becomes, how ought you to behave when someone asks you to create answer, even when you know for a fact you're not trickling, and because error side is forbidden it. So how should that behave? We have my question here, and now we have Justin's response.
So do you want to show the response?
It's the response.
So wouldn't this also apply to create offer and future offers too?
Yes, I think it would. Although I guess we need to remember that you're supposed to that trickle doesn't work for future offers. Yeah.
Right. So we need to remember like that value and that the API will work differently based on.
Awful, isn't it?
It's not super great. I mean, the problem is that the application, if it's talking to something that it doesn't know if whether it supports trickle or not, it needs to not trickle if it, it doesn't support trickle. The only way to find that out right now is to mine it out of the SDP, which is not great. Yeah.
I mean, so
I would prefer to have this as an application level sort of thing that's exposed as opposed to like having different API behaviors, to be perfectly honest.
So you mean application level thing saying
Can trickle.
Can trickle. So the logic the way the application has to work is it has to at the time when it calls set remote, it's got to inspect some property and say can trickle.
Yeah.
People are really going to get that wrong. I mean.
Okay,
so to take a step back, to take a step back, right? You're a WebRTC, browser, right? And someone sends you an old school SIP server calls you, right? Client calls you, and so he doesn't send any trickle attributes, and so you set remote, and that's all fine because it's full of ICE candidates, and then you call create answer, but you know for a fact that I can't trickle, right? So what the hell goes in your answer, and how do you arrange? And if it's not all the candidates, what do you have to do to arrange that it contains the candidates?
Path would be identical to if it was a trickle one. The browser would need to generate all of the ICE callbacks, candidate gathering things for everything, and when you finally got the final one, you'd send it.
But how do you know you should do that? How does the application know it should in fact not trickle? Because sometimes you're getting calls from guys who are browsers, right? And those guys you want to trickle. Now you could send a PR answer, I suppose.
No. But where you're going here is that the SDP, when you have an offer that does not have all of the candidates filled into it, that's not a final offer, that SDP shouldn't be indicated as type offer. It should be, indicated as type trickle offer.
I'm not going anywhere. Right. I'm just telling you how it is. So really we have three kinds of offers, right? We have offers which are complete and not trickle capable, offers which are complete but trickle capable, and offers which are incomplete and do trickle, right? Those are the three things we have.
And the only problem here is if you send you're saying you need to send a complete, not even an incomplete but valid
I'm saying
offer.
that the answer eventually when it gets to the other side has to be complete, right? How that's done is a different question, but the answer needs to be complete. And you've been told don't send me an incomplete answer. Now that doesn't say that it can't be patched up in the application as Justin suggests. But the only way of doing that right now is to scrape the SDP.
Okay, so I think every application developer will get this completely wrong, and the only way we can stop people from shooting themselves in the foot is the browser, if it recognizes that the other side's not trickle capable, it does not return, the create answer call is asynchronous, and it does not return an answer until it has an answer, a valid answer to return.
Right, so that's what, can you scroll down, Ted? Right, so that's what Justin.
And I agree, all these are ugly.
That's what Justin's arguing against here, right?
I mean,
it's so awful.
It's a half-hearted argument. I mean, those are the two options, really. Either that, create answer or subsequent create offers, if it knows the other side is not trickle capable, have to basically not emit on ICE candidate, and instead only emit an SDP in the success callback that has all the stuff filled in.
On ICE candidate, no. Because otherwise you're scraping again.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
yeah, I mean,
so my sense is the programming logic here, right? Is, you know, and the natural programming logic that everybody I see does is, you know, you attach an on-ice candidate, you know, callback, and that responds by translating a message up to the server containing the candidate, and then you call create offer, and, you know, and when the offer calls back, it translates that to the remote server, and like those are not interlocked in any meaningful way, and you know, you don't like look at your state machine at all, and maybe. But or conversely, if you want to do non-trickle, then you respond by waiting for on-ice candidate no and calling create offer and setting it up, right? And so we need something that makes those idioms work.
So my pitch to sell this to Justin, and it is selling here, is let's make the browsers operate in the same way that everybody writes their code such that it's fully exactly the right code for doing trickle, and that code continues to work even if the far end didn't send you a trickle capable invite, so that people don't write separate code for dealing with non-trickle.
But note that does not actually handle the case properly when you're the offerer and the other side is not doing trickle, because in that case you have to wait for on-ice candidate no.
sorry, I didn't parse that part.
You're the offerer. So we're just talking about the case where the SIP phone's calling you. You're calling the SIP phone. The only way for your code to work properly is to wait for on-ice candidate null and then call create offer and send that, right?
Right.
No, the first offer, as long as you didn't say bundle only, okay? If you were just with the default thing, the first offer has all valid addresses in it,
Not
right?
unless you wait for on-ice candidate null.
Oh, I see.
Whatever we're calling it today.
Right.
I think that's what we have.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that would be...
That was the proposal we discussed, yes.
The only thing that would make apps sad is the fact that if they get no candidates and then get on-ice candidate null, they might think it's actually like a failure condition.
Yeah.
That goes back to our previous discussion where if we actually fix that, so right now we only have null as our only thing, but if we're extending that to be like a more discriminative flag, like pool empty, ice candidate done, we can have something that really indicates success versus failure and not have null for both. I think that's the problem we have right now is null indicates both success and failure.
I'm not
grasping, I know.
Yeah, I mean, there'd be cases where you gather some candidates, but not all. Is that a success or a failure?
That's a common case, right? And it's like, in fact, like if you're given 4 turn servers, you know,
right, sure, exactly.
And much of the point of trickle is to enable that case, right?
Right. So let me make a pitch for the other school of thought, which would be that there's some, you know, trickle property that tells you whether or not you have to basically wait for all candidates to come in or not. And basically, the application code isn't that complicated. You say, if trickle, then don't send things on on-ice candidate. Just know when you get on-ice gathering state complete, then you actually just get call create offer and then send it off. So the actual JavaScript code is like 5 lines of code.
So I mean,
that wouldn't make me sad. I could live with that, right? I mean, obviously we'd have the capability needed, so whatever you want.
I mean, I'm not super excited about either one of these, but I prefer, you know, that because then the API works the same in all situations, and you just because you have to do just the same way you have to do different thinking on the offer side.
Yeah.
If you know that you have the same sort of logic, and it's if you're going to the chance that you're going to get that part right, even if we do this other part, you know, for you automatically, you know, it doesn't seem super good if you're not thinking about it. So since you have to think about it anyway, I would sort of default to thinking about it on both sides.
Right. I mean, so not to rewind the argument, but another way to deal with this would be to require would be to have the API do the right thing all the time and require an indicator to force trickle on the initial offer. I mean, I'm not saying I love that either, because that means you're going to get a lot of, that means as a practical matter, you're going to get trickle a lot of the time, but that would be another way to write this code that would actually be, like, would be less likely to be able to fuck it up, let's be honest.
Well, yeah, I would suggest we do trickle by default, and that you could say you want non-trickle via RTC configuration parameter, and then you would get the same behavior on the initial offer.
Right, but I guess, but what would you do? I mean, that's effective. But then would you say that then you'd say that in the case Colin's talking about, in the case where someone gives you an offer that isn't trickle, you behave as Colin suggests. I mean, that's what I meant by the right thing.
I'm saying if you set the parameter RTC configuration saying that I don't want to trickle, then you get that behavior that Colin suggests in the initial offer.
What do you get? What do you get in answers where? What do you get in answer? I mean, in answers will it be conditional or will answers be? I mean, because the behavior you really want is try trickle, is follow the guidelines. The behavior you actually want to be engaging in, if you don't know what the other side's capabilities is to follow the guidelines of the trickle light specification, namely to offer non-trickle, but to accept, but to respond with
The
trickle.
half trickle by default.
By default, correct. And so I guess what I'm saying is that
That's a behavior change for applications. So like anything that's a behavior change for existing applications, I'm not excited about.
okay, okay. Colin, Justin, Martin.
Oh, Justin has to buy us beer, and we go with his approach. That works for me.
Peter.
This is Peter. Would it make sense to have it throw an error if you call create answer in this situation, kind of like it was before with the PR answer, and the error indicates that you need to wait, instead of having a flag that you could not check and then accidentally shoot yourself in the foot by sending it?
So you mean the create answer would fail until gathering was complete?
It would fail with an error that says you need to wait until gathering is complete.
Oh yeah, I don't like that one.
I don't like that. That seems like I think it's gonna be flaky.
I was trying to avoid the shooting in the foot.
I think if we want automatic behavior out of smart behavior out of the browser, we need Colin's suggestion.
Yeah, and let me write the code, the JavaScript code that would, for either of these cases, and just kind of see what it would actually look like for app developers. And if it ends up being very straightforward to do the non-automatic behavior, I will buy beer and we can go with that. And if it turns out to be gross, then we can look at the implicit behavior.
Okay. Martin, you want to assign this to Justin? Can you do that?
Make a note of what kind of beer is preferred.
I think you are an administrator, Martin. So I think you can just
could we also have a date?
Because you need to add him as a gizmo. Okay, so good. So
but wait, as chair, I want a date for this. When is the no beer decision going forward?
Before we leave.
Before we leave. All right, I like that date.
Okay.
On Wednesday.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So number 20. We're trying to. I think you need to add him as a collaborator first. Okay. I see. I remember what the hell I was thinking here. Okay, scroll down. So right. So I think this may just be a specification defect, not really an issue. It may be editorial only. But the rules about how to generate a new offer under create offer basically say you can't change the ICE username and password, and then section 5.2.34 tells you if the ICE constraint is true, then you must change the username and password. And so one of these must be false, though it may simply be a matter of repairing.
5.2.3.4 supersedes the guidance in 5.2.2. By virtue of yes, occurring later.
I see we are adopting the Dr. Jonathan Rosenberg method of writing specifications.
So middle boxes are tracking the flows with ICE information, some of the candidates, right? Like we've got these mice extensions, like Dan Wing has like 22 different extensions that use ICE to do stuff, right?
They're bad extensions, but yes.
Bad.
All bad.
So the question is, I mean, clearly changing the password or the username, the password isn't the issue, the username. Changing the username is going to cause all the middle boxes to view these as completely separate things.
I believe,
and you might view that as a good thing or a bad thing.
I believe
That's the
Vice
question.
Restart actually requires changing both of them, so I think it doesn't matter which ones you change because they change the same name.
Okay. Right, is to truly restart everything. Okay.
I mean, I think we can agree this would probably be a foolish thing to do under most circumstances. I think, I mean, like, if we wanted to tell people, if we wanted to have some guidance about don't do this, like I'd be okay with that or not.
Yeah, we should definitely put some guidance in the draft that, you know, ICE restart may have unintended consequences, but yeah, I get the point, it's fine.
I mean, I guess in general, you know, any use of create offer or create answer in these half-open states is kind of wacky, right? But I mean, I haven't heard anybody. I mean, so but I mean, it's quite clear in the specification that, like, you know, like I can't remember what section it is, but it like says like you know, the 3264 state machine prohibits doing this stuff, but we allow you to do it in JSF. So I mean, it's not like for, you know, we may think it's foolish, but like I think we agreed that we were going to allow you to do this kind of stuff. So okay, great. Well, that's pretty good. We're now done with ICE. No, just for this discussion. Oh wow, API and ICE were the same. That's even more awesome. Oh no, hang on a second. I'm figuring out how to mess with the filters. Ah, good. Okay. Okay, number. Oh, this is easy. Number 13.
Previous one is yes. ICE restart requires a change of credentials. Yes. That's dangerous.
Okay, I think this is simple, but the bundle policy is named default, and it's also the default, and that seems like not the best design anybody's ever had. So the proposal is to change it to mixed or balanced or some such thing. I like mixed, but I'd like to live with balanced. Does anybody have any objection to one of these? If not,
I propose editor discretion. Yes.
Sounds good. Are you just going to send me a pull request, Martin? Great. GTFO, yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Number 16, please. What is that? Is that we're going to call it Thatcher? That's exactly what I was concerned about. Is one day like someone's going to show up and say bundle only is the default. That's exactly what I was concerned about, actually. I was actually noticing that one of the somewhere like there was a null, and I was like, oh, this is nothing could ever go wrong if I have a string named null. I suppose we change it to the string none, actually, or undefined. True, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay. So we have accessors now for the current descriptions, but not for proposed descriptions. By which I mean that if you're not in stable state, then there can potentially be two descriptions outstanding: the one you're currently adopting and the one you set remoted or set localed, and you might have to roll back. And so there's these to-dos in here. So should we add new ones? What do people think? I think there's probably.
Let me add one motivational comment for perhaps adding them, which is the stats are going to be reporting on the current. And so you're going to be getting statistics for something that do not match SDP that you can see in the slightest at all. That might be confusing in some situations.
Okay.
Yeah, Martin Thompson, I've previously proposed that we do this, and
We just need
I think we should do
names.
this. Yeah, active local description, active remote description, or something like that. I mean, editorial discretion again, I think.
Well,
in
it's
that
going
regard.
to be WebRTC editor discretion, right?
Exactly.
No, we need some input here.
Okay. So I think the relevant question is.
We'll figure it out.
I think the relevant question is you would like to not change the behavior of the current properties, namely they reflect what's actually installed, but they reflect the current properties are basically proposed, not current, right?
I don't think it's actually fully defined. I think that the current properties actually indicate what is actually active, and then we should add members for pending.
No. The current ones definitely are proposed, unless the proposed is the same as the active, right? In all the current stuff, right? Like when you call set local, I mean, imagine when you're doing a second offer, right? What the SDP is not the current. It's what's actually was proposed that you pass to the other side, because this is the thing you get it from. So if we don't want to break up existing code, the current things have to be the proposed, and we'll have to add a second variable for, I'll call it active.
Yeah, whatever makes the current code not break, we should just do.
Yeah, that's okay. So,
So we've agreed that the current code, that the current code basically says that they're overwritten when you call set mumble mumble, and will continue. And so that means that they continue to dot proposed, and then the other one. Actually, now that I've had this discussion, I think we should actually probably make 2 new ones called proposed and active, and then
Polyfill them back.
and then the old one maps to proposed.
Okay, so I mean, to keep existing code working, then we'll have it go. Yeah, sure.
So my claim is that to the extent to which the semantics are all consistent, the current local description is actually proposed local description, and the current mode is actually proposed mode description. And so I propose to create 2 new ones for clarity, and then the old one maps onto proposed.
Sure.
Yeah, we're totally changing the syntax with constraints anyway, so why not break the rest?
Exactly. Well, like anyway, this is actually a question for the web RTC spectrum.
Let's add promises while we're in there.
Just a minute, I'll open a bug on that.
Okay, great. Sounds like a plan.
So just don't go ahead too quick. I just need a little bit of time to get that recorded.
Okay, we're actually doing quite well. So,
So is that a temporary? Sorry, Peter again. Is that a temporary thing, like with a plan to remove it, or are we going to keep all 3 forever?
I'd like to discuss that tomorrow, this afternoon, I think.
Oh, right. Okay.
So
to do that though.
I'll definitely say I agree that we need to add, add new active ones, whether we like add this new, this is current and do the mapping or whatever. I think I'm not sure I agree with that yet, but we definitely need a new pair. That we need for sure.
Okay.
I would like it if there was a plan to only end up with 2 and not.
I tend to agree with that.
Okay.
My sense is that no. My sense is not that these aren't so heavily used that people can't be given 3 months or 6 months warning and have their replications busted, but maybe I'm wrong.
We have the polyfill to deal with these types of forklifts, so I'm not concerned.
Okay. Number. Oh, we did that already. Good. Martin just didn't mark it already. Give me a second to. It's a different one. Hang on a second. I'm going to do it. Is there a way to do to filter for things that are not for negative? No. I wish, huh? Okay. Oh goody. Assignment. So I think this is actually going to be non-controversial. Number 22, please. So Ted, my sense is we have another 15, 20 minutes, which is doing quite well in terms of time. I know I have more time allocated in the slot, but although I don't know how much time when we play. Lunch is right there. So I suggest I think we'll probably get through all these issues and we can have lunch. Do we have time allocated afterwards for this, or am I just catching everybody up from being here behind?
You're catching up.
Oh, perfect. Then I feel better about that.
You are between us and lunch.
Okay. Well, So number 22. So okay. So there's this complicated set of rules. Oh yes, right. So create offer had some complicated set of rules, and the create answer had some not very clear rules. I suppose that we create answer offers have to be the same as the create offer rules, and that in fact you have to the M lines have to match up, right? I mean, like, the create offer basically says you sort by media stream and then type within media stream, by add time and then type within, right?
Yeah. So Martin Thompson, I think that's fine. Obviously, the discussion about how answers allocate media streams to M lines and reuse models and all those sorts of other things sort of play into that a little bit on the answerer side. But the offerer certainly should be constructing, anyone who creates a new M section offerer should be creating them in a predictable fashion, and this seems like
Well,
a
so
reason.
the relevant point here is, say I give you an offer with 23 send receive media streams, right?
Yep.
Or receive only media streams, right? So at this point, basically, I need to map on the ad stream and ad track events onto those streams, right? I can't exceed the number of streams. I still need to map them on, right? And so what I believe I do is I just fill a bucket. That is to say, I order them the way I would order them if it was set as create offer, and then I map them on as they come down. And if I run out, I run out, and that's the way it is, right? Which actually, by the way, raises the interesting question of what does happen if you try to add stream to if you're an answerer and you try to add streams when they're not available. You
inaccessible to the offer. Yeah, negotiation needed.
And so what happens? And that's what that happens if you're in have remote. If you're in have remote state.
Yeah. Let's just say we had a call up and going. We're all nice and happy.
That's not the case I'm worried about, though.
But I'm going to say that the case you're worried about should be exactly the same as that case.
Well, so I think you're going to find that makes you sad. So like, let's take a step back. Well, let's take a step back even further, right? So do I get on negotiation needed when every time I call ad track, even though, it's like the guy offered me an audio and a video, in his offer, right? Do I get on negotiation needed as soon as I add a matching MST, or only when I start exceeding? Yeah. So basically, in my typical call, now that we're doing ad track and not ad stream, will involve at least 2 calls to on negotiation needed on my side, even though like I know perfectly well negotiation is needed.
This is Adam Roach. I would think you probably want to hold on to those until you were in a state you could actually generate an offer. So basically, you'd have to actually have the answer in hand before you start getting on negotiation need. If we held on to it, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
If we held on until then you'd only get the one call back, and you could have some very naive code that basically you send your answer, and then only after you're done with that do you find out, oh, I need to send a new offer.
Right. So this is in my comments on the WebRTC spec that I sent out like this morning. So maybe so I don't know if we want to discuss this now or later, but I think the notion that on negotiation needed is called in states when like you clearly like when you know the application is perfectly well negotiation is needed, like is despicable. So
I don't think
understand that like if you call create before you call create offer, as soon as you add track, you get on negotiation needed. That's the very first thing that happens, and that is the way the specification is currently written.
I think it's fine. It's like a dirty bit.
Yeah.
But no, it's not. It's not. The problem is not a dirty bit. The problem is that people do. The problem is that people. It's reactive, not bit setting, right? And so if you write your naive code to respond to on negotiation needed by calling create offer, then the consequence is going to be that you will generate 2 offers.
Well, we could change the how it's implemented and say queues a task, so that if you do multiple things, that like you only get one on negotiation needed because it waits for the next turn of the event loop or something.
Well, my concern is add track is very soon. I believe add track will soon be asynchronous, at which point we're going to be back in the soup.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of problems here. One being that you add a track, you're generating an answer. You actually do some negotiation, but that track wasn't actually able to be added to the set of media sections that were given to you by the offerer. So you still need to know that you need renegotiation after that negotiation finishes, if you get what I mean. Right?
You state that?
So, okay, you add a track, you're the answerer. So you're in the stable state because you haven't actually received an offer yet. You get on negotiation needed. You apply the offer. You add another track, right? On negotiation needed again. You generate an answer. You only had one slot free to actually put the 2 tracks that you have. One of those goes in, the other one hangs around. You complete the negotiation. Negotiation has happened, but you still need negotiation.
Right. So as soon as you apply your new local description that only has one of those tracks, you get an on negotiation needed immediately that you then can call create offer, paste an offer with 2 end lines in both your tracks.
So Hi, all this, John. At one point, I was at one point a couple of years ago, I suggested that on every time we entered stable state, we would check if the configuration in the SDP still matched the configuration in the list of tracks we had on both sides, and if that was false, we would fire on negotiation needed. In this scenario, we would never fire on fire negotiation needed while we were in an unstable state.
But unstable, you mean quote stable, or you mean the HTML5 stable?
I mean any state that is not stable.
No,
while we are negotiating, we don't fire.
But what I understand when you say stable is, do you mean the HTML5 notion is stable, or the peer connection being stable?
The peer connection is stable.
Right. That makes sense to me.
So okay, so you would suppress negotiation needed in cases where you were not in stable states.
Yep.
And generate a synthetic one when you enter the stable state, and the stable state doesn't reflect what you actually want.
I would consider that satisfactory.
Right, and then like the response by the application to on negotiation needed is always create offer then.
But I don't. So that works in all the states except the PR answer one, because suddenly you won't be getting negotiation needed when it's needed in PR answer mode, when you're in a PR answer, right? I mean, I'd have to look at the state diagrams.
Then you would need to know.
This isn't on the off. I was thinking on the answering side.
Sorry, the answering side?
It seems like we maybe should have a separate issue for this particular thing, and then
we do need a separate issue for this particular thing.
I move that we close this issue, move on, have a new issue for this, and we can maybe take Harold's proposal and see what other mangling needs to be done to it to move forward.
Seems like we could sit down and try to work through details.
Right.
Since it's okay, that's satisfactory to me. Issue. Yes, the canonical order, correct. It's already been defined.
It's same as the offer case.
Quite so. Okay, great. Okay, and this shouldn't take long. Issue number 8. So this was a reminder to me, but we still need to discuss it. I'd like to discuss policy. Section 6 might need a little work, because it sort of says you can screw with some stuff in SDP, and as they say, that things are categorized in the following lists of always, sometimes, and never. I'd like to get some sense of someone's got to go through all these, which is hideous. We have Suhas's list, which I guess will be helpful. We could add things, add a column to the spreadsheet. But I think we should probably try to get some understanding of, on what base, can we get to a common understanding of a basis where we make this decision? Yes.
So just more clarification. This is the changes that you would do between create offer and set local descriptor.
Yes. Set between create foo and set local. Yes. Obviously, you can do anything you want between create foo and shipping out the door. I mean, if you're foolish enough. I've heard a bunch of commentary on this. The effect of which we should have to almost never do this, and every time we think we should do this, we add an API point. In many cases, the browsers are going to either ignore or refuse to do things.
So look, this is going to be a hassle for the browser. On the it may work, I could care less. But on the it must work list, that's work for the browsers. Okay. And it's not going to be simple work. So I would suggest that we drive this by. There's a use case where you need to modify the SDP at this stage. Most of the use cases where you need to munge, where people want to munge SDP, actually are in what gets shipped out of the browser, not what happens between these two calls. So I'd say let's deal with it on a use case basis. People bring forward, say I want to be able to modify this. And the default is things are not on the list unless on the you must implement this list. unless somebody sort of has a use case and says, hey, I'd like to argue for that. And when we get the use cases too, we can also ask the question, well, I mean, would there be a much better way to do this that didn't require STP munging? I mean, that would be my general approach for how to look at this problem. I'm not the guy who has to write the code, so.
So currently the text says the only thing you must honor is changing codecs, and everything else you can, everything else is either forbidden at your at browser discretion. And and in fact, most things are forbidden as far as I can tell. Krishna?
Yeah, I mean, this of course depends on how many STP extensions you're going to use in the STP and how much you can control when you create offer, you know what's going to be. I mean, but I agree, the codec is maybe the most common proposal people talk about, because you create offer gives you more codecs than you actually want to use. But yeah.
Justin?
I think it would be very difficult if you're going to start specifying which things you're allowed to because every time there's a new STP extensions coming, you would have to say, okay, so now what and if can you modify in this one?
I think that my assumption, that's an excellent point about new extensions. My assumption was that we would say that we would prohibit a bunch of stuff and say the browser must throw an error under those circumstances, and the assumption would be that every new thing that was defined had to come that everything that wasn't on the prohibit list had to be at least silently ignored or honored, and then when a new extension was generated, we'd say which category it fell into, but that you couldn't depend on it being any new extension that was generated after this being rejected by the browser.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, so we support changing just about everything. So like, there's at least one sort of example point that it's not super complicated to do this, although specifying, it will probably be a fair amount of energy. That being said, like we've also kind of moved toward the doohickeys model, which has kind of obviated some of the need for this. So I guess my real thing is like, how big of a deal is it for other implementations to support this? And if things are super hard, we can kind of see, pick some stuff that's easy and just like, start with that, a very minimal whitelist, and then, add things as scenarios come up where we say, well, people really need to do this or something else. I would just like to finish. So if we end up with an overly conservative list, we could always flesh it out more later.
So I suggest that we follow Colin's general proposal, which is, I think that we start with the assumption that things. I think we start with the assumption, Colin, that things are in the you can touch them but no guarantee state, and then we'll go through the list, and everything which we think is hazardous will mark as must not, and everything which has a plausible use case will mark as must honor, and then we'll wait for people to come up with better with use cases or arguments of hazard, not to move things off of the none of your business.
I'm just not really super excited about the implementation dependent bucket, right?
Which is why I suppose to leave things by default in that state.
So I think the point that Christopher made earlier, though, is pretty important. Ted Hardy speaking, which is that there will be new things that emerge after the spec is complete, and so there needs to be a default state for what happens when something which is not on the list appears.
I believe it is ignored.
Okay, so I think that if it's ignored, that's one. But what I actually heard before was ignored but might be honored, and I think that does leave you in that implementations.
Sorry, I think implementation specifics is what I assumed. Sorry, that's what I really meant.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing where it's like, the application vendor knows it's in the not guaranteed to be supported list, and if it works, great, but like you shouldn't be really counting on that.
Oh, okay, so anything that's not in the list, whether because we didn't do it or because it arrives from the future, that's the default state. I think we need to capture that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Martin Thompson, I think this is probably fine, but I think that we need some degree of determinism for applications. So in the case where you have stuff that the browser supports changing, the browser will act upon that. If there's stuff that's changed that the browser doesn't support, maybe we need to say that the browser generates an error.
So
rather than just ignoring it, because there's stuff that's going to go in there, and I won't know whether or not my changes have been acted upon.
Right. I heard ignore as don't let that happen and throw an error.
Oh, okay.
So
appearing ignore, and I think that's probably
okay. So maybe we can rewrite that into three categories: things you must accept and honor, things you must reject, and things you must either accept or reject, but you must throw an error if you reject.
Correct. I think that's the right way to do it.
Right. If I change my ICE credentials and the browser doesn't support changing ICE credentials, like I want to know.
Yeah.
Which is required, not allow you to do, by the way.
I think that's no longer required now that we have DTOS.
Yeah,
well,
we had that discussion, and I think the conclusion to that was that ICE credentials can be changed.
So in that case, let's discuss that, because the text says you can't do it.
Right. Well, so the old text, which was from the SDES era, said that, but I don't think that the reason for preventing that no longer applies any longer.
Martin, can you make an issue for that? Because I want to think about that. But
So the detecting the parts of the SDP that you don't support and have been changed, I'm just thinking about, I mean, that might be harder to implement than you think.
How would you ever get an SDP that you don't support that's been changed? I mean, like, if you see something that's in the SDP that you don't know about, then you barf. You're generating the SDP, so if you get something that you don't support, you're like, well, who stuffed this in here?
Well,
and so understand.
You're going to have to define the specs on that very carefully, because the SDP specs meant to be ignore some stuff and skip over stuff that you don't understand, and so you're going to have to go figure out that you detect that in your parsers, and understand the difference between, I don't understand what 3 white spaces in a row means, and 3 white spaces in a row mean nothing, and they're just allowed in SDP, right? I mean,
well, I'm assuming that.
If I define an extension that says 3 white spaces in a row mean, use SDES, right? Your browser is not going to generate an error for that. Now, you can say that is completely useless. That's an insane way to extend SDP, and I agree with you. But detecting extensions you don't understand has always been a hard problem. That's all I'm saying. So I think you'll need to work on some. I'm fine with the principle. We're just going to need to work on some text of what you'll be able to detect and how.
I thought that. Yeah. Okay. I think we also have to assume some level of sanity on the okay. Yeah. I was going to say something like now I realize makes no sense, which is assume some level of sanity on the part of people extending SDP.
Also, clearly, you haven't read don't SDP. Do that principle. Like, if you use
But that's what I mean. We're just going to need to write down a little bit about what what the bounds, what the shape of the insane asylum is.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, great.
No one.
So you're making an issue for that, Martin? That's interesting. Sorry. Okay. Okay.
So before you move on, we need the conclusion from that, so we can.
Martin is going to summarize it, I believe.
We have 2 categories. Sorry, let me use mine. So we have 2 categories of things you can change, and things that you must not be able to change, and we will define. So there's 2 things a browser can. No, okay. So there's 2 things a browser can do. It can either take the change or reject the change. It can't ignore the change. We've eliminated that 3rd category, and we will enumerate some things that fall into the 1st category and some things that fall into the last category, and everything else is indeterminate. It could be either. It's up to the browser. It can either accept the
reject,
change,
but it has to give you a result.
Yeah.
I mean,
it has to do with either one of those 2 things.
It is important, though. I mean, as a practical matter, as Colin points out, we'll probably accidentally silently ignore some stuff we shouldn't be silently ignoring. But that's just the way it is.
Yeah. And there'll need to be some text on that stuff.
Just this is Roman speaking. Somewhat of a stupid question, like the meaningless formatting changes, which don't change the meaning of the SDP. Like they probably should be.
I would assume we would accept this.
Yeah, well, you would accept those, but they would not pass through to the actual SDP that will be generated in the or would you basically try to format?
I mean, so I think you're right. The semantically null changes, I assume we're planning to store the. I think at the end of the day we're going to be storing the SDP in some sort of data structure as opposed to as a string. So yeah, I mean I think that like extra white space you get lost.
Yeah. So that there may be ways to smuggle some interesting information past the guard of the browser in this way. So if you reorder the A equal candidate lines in a particular way, that could convey some special semantic to a peer, and it could do something interesting as a result. Good luck with that. We're not trying to close all of the holes here. Yeah.
Okay, so is 12:20? I'm still staying between you and lunch. There's probably 4 or 5 more issues to go. Some of them are simple, some of them are not. Okay. Okay. So number 9, please. I didn't understand this. I'm hoping someone will tell me what to do. I assume the fact there's an open issue meant it wasn't obvious to somebody else too.
Colin, I think you added this one. I've always assumed that AS was what we were going to be using. And this is maximum total bandwidth for the M section, assuming it's on at the meeting level.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm fine with using AS. I think that the question I was wondering on this one here is what happens, I mean, if there is a B, so the create offer, create answer will never generate a B equal, right? That's what you're thinking?
Right.
Okay, and so I mean, maybe this is one in the cat, so what happens if somebody adds a B equal?
Okay, so this is an interesting discussion. So
and I'm glad to call this into the insane category and say, don't do that. This
By the
will
way,
be fine with me.
it's not a must not, Colin, it's a should not. Generate B equals.
I mean, if you get a B equals, so my understanding is if you get a B equals from the remote side, like that represents the maximum bandwidth that you should ever send to that remote side. And of course, you're going to use congestion control, so you want to start out sending, just a flat rate of bandwidth at that B equals level. But like if it says don't send me more than 200 kilobit, you won't send 2 megabit.
Okay, so if you get a B equal from the other side, you have to pay attention to it.
Yes.
Will we will we ever generate B equals in any of the stuff SDP we produce? Obviously, we'll generate AS. That goes without saying. Question is, do we also do B equals? Because lots of things don't
B
support
equals AS, right? I mean, like, I'm not sure what you're referring to as AS other than B equals.
Oh, okay. I meant the one, CT, I guess. So, okay, you're just going to say B equals AS everywhere. Is that? Magnus, just tell us what to do here. You know the right answer, and you're not telling us.
You can send me a pull request and sit down if you want.
Sign this to Magnus.
Magnus, you also have to take care about RR and RS because we're gonna need those to configure the RTCP bandwidth. So, yeah, including the security issues doing that, but it's still an important thing to actually be able to configure your RTCP bandwidth so it behaves sanely and meets your goals. So, yeah, then I will. So he asked why 5% isn't sufficient. So 5% of, I mean, the only issue with about 5% is that you actually have to have common enough understanding between the endpoints what you have. You're going to take 5% of to start with. 5%, if it's sufficient or not, depends on your use case. So if you have something which isn't particularly high bandwidth but needs a lot of feedback, you might actually want to have higher RTCP bandwidth than 5% because 5% of an audio stream doesn't give you lots of room to send reports for congestion control, etc. So an audio-only session that you want congestion control on using RTCP, which I assume is likely to be, you might end up in a situation where you actually need more bandwidth for RTCP to be able to do that. So that's why 5% might not be sufficient. So.
Okay, so getting back to the discussion of like when do we ever generate one of these things? Like we need to honor them. And it sounds like we might also need to honor B equals RS and what was the other one? RR. And we can figure out exactly how that works and whether there's any security considerations there. But the only other thing that would make a difference here is if we have some property on the RTP receiver, and if the RTP receiver wanted to designate a max bandwidth, then that would probably show up as like a B equals. And we haven't even gotten into on the doohickeys like whether or not what actual properties do people need to have. I would kind of try to avoid this if possible, and let the sender sort of decide what the right thing to do is. But maybe other people have other ideas.
question here. Now I'm going to show Magnus show my ignorance about what you're actually saying. So you're saying you're not actually generating these today? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, an application might want 10 megabit, another application might only want 200 kilobit. Like, there's no way to know right now what to fill in for B equals.
I disagree to some degree. I mean, I think you can do very sane assignments of BAS saying, okay, oh, you added a video stream. It's that resolution. Well, you're never going to go above 2.5 megabits of this, period. I mean, you can basically do it based on what's the media type, what's the resolution, and what you're going to maximum send for a reasonable media quality, a good media quality of that stream. I think you can do that programmatically and actually determine values for whatever you handle. So I think you can generate these values at least on media stream level, and then you can add them together for, so at least generate the upper ceiling for what you're gonna accept.
But you don't know at the other side. I mean, you can know how much bandwidth to produce for yourself because you know what the video stream is and what the resolution is, but a B equals is what you're going to accept. And like, you have no way to fill that in intelligently.
I mean, we're talking about M lines where you're saying, okay, if you assign a send receive, you can reasonably at least say, okay, this is a video stream. Let's add 2-3 megabits for each or something. I mean, if you can do some at least adjustments of saying, okay, this is what I start with, saying that.
I mean, really rough, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like we barely know what kind of internet connection we're
If I'm on an iPhone and I have like a 320 by 480, camera, and I'm sending 4 megabit out, I'm, not gonna be too happy about that. So I think you can, a sender choose a nominal bit rate based on the resolution, but that's not what goes into B equals. And people have already expressed the desire, I'm gonna do a thumbnail, or I wanna do like super high res telepresence stuff. And so like, it's really rough.
I mean, I agree with you saying the problem is the receiver direction. But you also know, I mean, the other aspect of BAS together is actually consider about, oh, I'm on interface. This interface will never handle more than 5 megabits. And then you actually should encode that into the SDP saying, oh, you can't give me more than 5 megabits. But that's really, when we're talking session level, or I mean, across the whole thing, that you should be up there saying, oh, no more than 5 megabits in total, Terry.
But now we are well out of the province of web browsers. Like, there are no web browsers that can only accept 5 megabits. So like, we can process B equals to have that, but like no WebRTC implementation in a browser is going to do that. I suggest we table this for the doohickeys discussion, and then we can, I can address this specifically.
I mean, I think the one case you might know is you might be able to distinguish, you can distinguish between, between mobile and non-mobile networks. But again, like, that only works if you're only on mobile and nothing else. If you're like on mobile and Wi-Fi, now we're back in the soup.
Yeah.
What do you think the limit for a mobile network is?
If you're on a Taraco.
I know you live in the Bay Area where it's pretty small, but outside of the Bay Area.
I'm more meant if you're in if you're in like Nigeria. And we do have some knowledge. I mean, I guess what I would say is the rate control mechanisms need to be able to work this out pretty quick, pretty damn quick.
Right. I mean, I think B equals is the upper bound for the rate control mechanism.
I mean, I was hoping they were going to slow start to some extent, so.
They really ought to if they think they're going to have any chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
So. Otherwise, your keyframe's going to only half get there.
Okay, so I think the important text for this document here, right?
I thought it was going to be simple. I thought it was going to be someone's going to say AS, right?
Yeah. But I mean, it seems to me like it doesn't actually, I mean, I think Justin's saying like, look, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be generating B equal lines at all here.
Our text says,
right.
says should not do that. I can make it a must not, but it says should not right now.
I don't think it has to be a must not. Whatever.
And that's fine.
Right, but unless it has specific, maybe even needs to be phrased as it shouldn't generate it unless it has specific reasons to know what the limits would be. That would at least make the should more reasonable. But the important thing is it needs to be able to receive them, obviously.
Hey, can you pull the draft? Search for the string session information, or I equals actually be fine too. Cannot pull up the draft. I blame Justin. This has got to be his fault somehow.
Yeah. That draft took too much bandwidth to display in this session.
So while we're fiddling with that, another comment from Randall through the Jabber room. Per Magnus, for audio only opus variable bitrate, music, etc., we may want to use RR/RS bandwidths, for example. As for defaults, the resolution can change during the stream. B equals AS may be used for hardware codecs that can't handle bandwidths higher than XXX.
You can't bring up the draft. I'd like you to bring up the draft so you can see the text. The relevant paragraph in the actual internet draft. Look for I equals. Yes. It'll become clear in a second when you see that. Yes, so this is what we say about B equals here. That not useful in this context should not be included. I'm happy to change this to whatever people tell me to change it to if it needs to be changed. That's what we say. Sure. This is about sending. Now, there's other ones about receiving.
If we had a should, I think, I mean, it's still important to know what it means, the semantics, if it's included, you know, for whatever reason.
I concur, and so yeah. So right. So to be clear, right now the situation. So right now, to be clear, right now the situation is that this section here says don't send it, and section 6 says. Section 6, but by the way, the thing about how to change the SDP says this is what it means if you do it. There's nowhere in this document that actually says how to handle B equals if it's sent to you. This is entirely about what you generate and what you modify. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a section that says what to do if it's sent to you.
Relaying from Randall, he says, I think we may want to send it if we have a hardware codec limit.
Okay. Again, I'm not taking a position on this. I'm just trying to drive to a conclusion.
I mean, do people know of codecs that are actually like bandwidth limited as opposed to like macro blocks per second or resolution limited?
I don't.
Colin Jenks, a codec that's at the end of a USB 1 connection, okay, because it's there, is limited by the USB 1 speed. And like, yes is probably the answer.
I hear we're on USB 3 now. But...
Speed.
Chromebook. But hey. Look, I'm not arguing for this one way or another. I mean, it has a should. People could have reasons, such as Randall suggested, for violating that should under certain cases. It's not going to cause any damage or harm here. I think like we're spending way too much time on this issue. I think the should's fine, right? Sure. Right? You're not going to generate them for the typical use case. That sounds fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to hit on is the larger question of how do people want to control bandwidth actually in a WebRTC session, but I think this is outside the scope of this discussion.
Probably not this way, right?
This happens to be the only defined way in SDP.
Okay. So what is the proposed conclusion? Leave this text as is and change the other, and do what with the other open issue?
Yeah, I would leave this text as is. We might need to mention somewhere that we honor B equals AS and possibly RS and RR.
Right. So
and then remove the open issue.
That would be in the section, the yet to be written section called set remote description.
Touche.
I'm happy to leave it open.
So I think we should work a little bit offline, but I think basically people are saying you need to deal with RRS and AS. You don't need to deal with CT. And yes, we will need to write that down.
So can we task somebody to actually do that because I'm not qualified?
For
Absolutely.
that, and we'll try and get it out of him before he goes on parental leave.
Great. Martin?
If not, we give it to one of his children. Maybe,
Oh, yeah.
maybe the older one, because that would be more sensible.
Yeah, Martin, you'll edit appropriately. We are still on issue number 9, and so you need to either create an issue for Magnus to actually write some text here, or something. Assign it to Magnus, I guess, perhaps, if you can figure out how to do that. Meaning assign it to Ted to harass Magnus.
Yep.
Okay.
I think we should stop now because it is now overtime. We can come back to this tomorrow if we've got open
or
time.
not. I mean, like, I work for you.
No. So I do now begin to fear they might take the food away, thinking we were ignoring it. So let's break for lunch, everybody. We'll come back and reconvene as Web RTC under new leadership at the end of the thing. Thanks.
So my sense is like the problem there is the problem there is that my sense is the real problem there is just that, like, I don't know this one. Like, I really like ordinarily I'm like an expert in something. So I sent you, by the way, very extensive comments on part of the data tools that could essentially like 30% of the material sits in one section because that's how spec renders it. And you know it's really hard. I know.
Got sort of an outline for like a co-author. I didn't know if like you would be interested in doing that or something. Both of them lower level. I'll send it to you and see if it strikes any nerves.
Someone has proposed a new state machine. Serious. I think that's serious.
And the point is your fault, isn't it? Oh, holy shit! Like these guys, they're pretty mean about this, aren't they? Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised it didn't have like a big, like fucking, like big rock glued to it. That's right. This charger is a flag. Does have an RFID tag in there? Might. I think it just that's what he wants. For shaming. The fact that Peter had a temporary charger and it's been flagged as like don't log out with this.
So
and you can pull out duct tape on it.
I will say, runs these like educational conferences for people. And I had Joe for a long time. I had Joe halfway through every year. And as long as there's not a revolt going on, or even if there is, actually, that's really a great way to pay for it.
You ever seen Freak Brennan? You told me about it. Freak Brennan. Yeah. It's like, whenever I get down, I look at the pictures in my desk says, yeah, that's the guy who invented JavaScript. So Andreas Goldbach.